If you were stranded on an uncharted island full of massive, prehistoric creatures that could kill you in the blink of an eye, what would you do? This team of soldiers and scientists have just made a discovery that could change the world as we know it. But first, they'll have to live to tell the tale, and it's not going to be easy. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to survive the prehistoric death machines in Kong Skull Island. These explorers are about to find out what it's like to be back at the bottom of the food chain. At the end of the war in Vietnam, researcher Bill Ronda, the head of a top-secret government organization called Monarch, travels to the capital in search of funding for his next expedition. They're hoping to catch a flight to the legendary Skull Island, convinced that what they might find there could lead to incredible scientific breakthroughs. After reminding the senator that they wouldn't want opposing countries to get there first, he finally agrees to fund the trip, but that was their biggest mistake. They'll be escorted by an Army aviation unit led by Lieutenant Colonel Packard, who's been having some trouble coming to terms with the end of the war, and eagerly accepts the new assignment despite knowing the risks. While Parker prepares his men, Rhonda and his partner, geologist Houston Brooks, recruit expert tracker James Conrad, who can help them survive in the jungle in case things go wrong, and boy, are they going to. Finally, there's photographer Mason Weaver, who's joined up because she thinks that there's more to the story of Skull Island than the officials are willing to tell. The island is surrounded by a never-ending storm that makes reaching it by boat impossible, but their plan is to use the Army helicopters to break through. After dropping seismic charges to study what lies below the island, they're going to land for a ground expedition that will last for 3 days, until they finally regroup for extraction on the north shore, with anyone who misses the chopper out risking being left behind for good. The choppers manage to get through the storm by the skin of their teeth, and on the other side, they're met with one of the most breathtaking views that any of them has ever seen. But it isn't long before their Apocalypse Now moment is brought to an abrupt end. No sooner do they start dropping charges than one of the helicopters is taken down by a whole-ass flying tree. They've officially gotten Kong's attention, and he is pissed. One by one, he starts swatting down the choppers like flies, with the fire from their heavy machine guns barely leaving a scratch. The soldiers scramble to get control of the situation, but they do about as well as an army of ants going up against a battleship, with all of their aircraft destroyed and more than half of the men already dead, as Kong marches away into the valley. Okay, well, that didn't take long. Kong here just took out that entire helicopter unit without so much as breaking a sweat. It looks like Packard and his men are in just a bit over their heads with this one. They need to get things under control, and fast, before the rest of them end up listed as missing in action. But from the looks of it, that's going to be much easier said than done. Let's be real. Attack helicopters armed with heavy machine guns would pretty much make you the top banana just about anywhere on Earth. When you come to Skull Island, you have to go through the king, and he didn't get that title by accident. Packard and his men might feel equipped to hold their own in any situation, but Kong here is unlike anything known to modern science. Kong is a giant ape, most closely resembling a silverback gorilla in appearance and behavior. And when I say giant, I mean giant. Put it this way, even your average everyday gorilla is nothing to sneeze at, with some of the largest males on record having reached an impressive 6.5 feet tall and tipping the scales at nearly 600 pounds. But Kong here makes even the most swole silverback look like a minnow swimming next to a megalodon. And that comparison still hardly does him justice. Ready to be impressed? While Jason Statham's mortal enemy only reached a measly 50 feet long and 50 tons in weight, this version of Kong stands at a preposterously massive 100 feet tall and weighs nearly 350,000 pounds, putting him closest in size to an adult blue whale, the largest species of animals to have ever existed. What makes things even crazier is that the Kong we see here is only an adolescent, meaning that he's still growing up, and by the time that he reaches his full potential, he'll be able to go toe-to-toe with Godzilla himself. So, if you end up on his bad side, there's nothing much else to say besides, it's been nice knowing ya. His enormous size naturally comes with unbelievable strength, with Kong's mighty fists boasting a crushing force of up to 150 tons, which, as we've just seen, is enough to crumple a US Army helicopter like a freaking soda can. He may be a tank, but life in the mountains of Skull Island has also given him the agility of an Olympic gymnast on steroids. He can leap between mountainsides with ease, and uses this ability to hold his own in battle, even when outnumbered by insanely aggressive opponents. If you're trying to harm him, then you're really going to need to break out the heavy artillery, because he's able to withstand a concentrated barrage from the Chopper's M16 machine guns without taking so much as a scratch. In fact, the only thing that did seem to hurt him was the Chopper's propeller blades, and even that didn't look like much more than a paper cut. Kong's not just a brawler, but a thinker as well. Like his real-life counterparts, Kong has an impressive, almost human level of intelligence, giving him the ability to fight strategically, change plans on the fly, and even use tools by turning objects in the environment into weapons to supplement his already incredible strength. All that is to say, your best and pretty much only chance to survive a battle with Kong is to avoid ever getting into one in the first place, which is exactly what Colonel Packard and his men should have done. In reality, gorillas don't go around just looking for a fight. They typically only attack as a means of self-defense when they feel threatened, and Kong here is no different. While they're certainly capable of holding their own in a fight against pretty much anything, their intelligence makes them prefer to resolve conflicts by communication, not violence. Still, that doesn't mean that you should walk up to one and try to give it a belly rub, but if you keep a respectful distance and mind your manners, then you shouldn't really be in any danger. When Packard and his unit started dropping bombs on the island, Kong here felt like he was under attack, which is why he chose to retaliate by destroying their helicopters. They don't know it yet, but their seismic charges also awoke something even more dangerous than Kong himself. Another reason why he felt like he needed to stop the choppers as soon as he could. Instead of escalating the situation, Parker should have immediately ordered his troops to pull back and observe Kong from a safe distance to see if he really is a threat. After all, they are in helicopters and could simply have flown right out of his range. Kong could have easily killed them all after destroying their vehicles, but instead he chose to leave once he thought that the threat was managed, which should tell you everything that you need to know when it comes to his true intentions. The truth is that the best way to beat Kong isn't going to be to fight him at all, but instead to learn to coexist with him peacefully. He can easily kill you if he has the mind to, but if you can find a way to communicate that you aren't a threat, he can also be an incredibly powerful ally, and they're going to need his help to get off this island even if they don't realize it yet. Now, let's say that despite getting absolutely stomped during their first encounter, Packard and the others are still looking for a fight. If you ask me, that's a pretty damn bad idea, but there's two possible approaches that they might want to take. In the wild, gorillas build nests where they spend an average of 12 hours per day sleeping, so they could try attacking him with explosives while he's down for a snooze. Option 2 is to get him while he's eating. Wild gorilla diets mostly consist of leaves and other types of foliage. If they can find an area of the island that's rich in these types of resources, then they could try setting a trap for Kong and ambushing him when he stops for a bite. Honestly, picking a fight with this guy is only going to get you a one-way ticket to Suplex City, so I wouldn't risk it. Their best bet here is to regroup, keep a low profile, get to the North Shore ASAP, and then wait for their ride off of the island. Because Kong isn't the only threat living in the jungles, which they're about to find out the hard way. After the battle, the expedition finds themselves split into two groups, with one team of survivors led by the tracker and the other by Packard. One of the pilots, Major Chapman, has crash-landed alone up in the mountains, but is able to make contact with the colonel over the radio. His chopper was carrying a bulk of their heavy weapons, so Packard and his men set out to find him, determined to bring Kong down by any means necessary, as revenge for their fallen comrades. Before leaving, Packard confronts Rhonda, demanding to know the truth about what's really going on here. It turns out that he was the only survivor from a shipwreck that was attacked by an ancient species of monster from this island, but the tragedy was covered up and hidden from the public. His real goal, all along, has been to prove that these monsters really exist so that the military can take action before they escape and destroy civilization as we know it. The geologist Brooks explains that the area under the island is actually full of massive hollow chambers where these creatures live, which is how they've gone undetected for so long. As they're trekking through the valley, they encounter a massive water buffalo the size of a 2-story house that emerges from the lake just yards away. The explorers are about to shoot, but Conrad tells them to hold their fire and the beast peacefully lumbers away. It looks like not everything on the island is hostile, but where there's prey, there are predators, and it's only a matter of time before they meet the creatures at the top of the food chain. While Packard's team is creeping through a bamboo forest, one of them is suddenly impaled by a massive stick that's really the leg of an enormous wandering arachnid, and it's hunting them for food. The men immediately open fire with their machine guns, but it reaches down with these disgusting suction cup-like tentacles and begins pulling one of them up towards its jaws. Unable to get a clear shot, they instead begin hacking the creature's legs off with their machetes, and the soldier manages to cut himself free with his knife just in time. Now they open fire on the creature once again, this time bringing it down as Packard finishes it off with his sidearm. It's a terrifying encounter, and for the soldiers, reality begins to sink in that they won't all be making it out of this alive. Okay, that was crazy. Kong is impressive enough on his own, but we've just gotten our first look at 2 more species of megafauna living here on the island. One prey and the other predator. Not everything that lives here wants to eat you, but some of them definitely do. So let's take a moment to look at each encounter and see what kind of strategies that we can come up with that might increase our chances of survival going forward. The first group had it easy. They were lucky enough to come across a giant species of herbivore called a skier buffalo. Despite its size, they didn't even know it was there until they were right on top of it because of how well they've evolved to blend in with their environment, something that we'll come back to in a minute. The second team, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. They met a mother longlegs, a species of giant carnivorous arachnid that stalks the island's forest hunting for live food. These 8-legged freaks may not be as dangerous as Kong, but they can certainly do some damage, especially if they catch you by surprise. With species this huge, it's going to be tough to outrun them, and any fight, although winnable, is going to leave several men dead at best. The most important thing to notice here is what each of these creatures have in common, and that is their highly developed camouflage. Now, in the natural world, camouflage is a defense mechanism used by animals to blend in with their environment, either as a means to avoid being spotted by predators like the buffalo, or getting the jump on unsuspecting prey like the spider. Camouflage doesn't need to be purely visual either. Some species also opt to cover up their scent, since smell is one of the most highly tuned senses used by predators and prey animals alike. The survivors here should take a page out of these species books and use camouflage to make themselves more difficult to detect. They could try rolling around in some mud, which would not only help them blend in visually with their natural surroundings, but also mask their scent. For extra creativity points, they could try covering themselves in the blood and viscera of the dead mother longlegs, since smelling like a predator is a great strategy for keeping other predators away. The mother longlegs here are arachnids, and most arachnids actually have fairly poor eyesight, hunting instead by feeling their prey's movements through their heightened sense of touch. If they encounter one again, they should avoid making any sharp movements, and possibly try throwing something like a rock or grenade in the opposite direction as a way to possibly distract the creature, so that they can escape. If all else fails, you can always let the others panic first, since the creature will be attracted to their movements, and use them as a meat shield so that you can get away. The best thing that they can do for now, though, is try to remain undetected. this island is a literal death trap that time forgot. But if they move carefully and avoid drawing too much attention to themselves, then they just might make it to the North Shore in one piece. Sometime later, Conrad's party discovers these ruined stone structures with strange yellow markings all over the walls. Before they even know what's coming up, a group of local warriors appear and quickly surround them, leading to a tense standoff that could turn deadly at any moment, until suddenly, an American who looks like Tom Hanks from Castaway comes running out to calm things down. It's Lieutenant Hank Marlowe, a pilot who crash-landed on the island during a battle nearly 30 years ago, and he's been living among the warriors ever since. Overjoyed to finally reunite with people from his home country, he explains that Kong isn't the only dangerous creature on the island, and tells them to follow him to safety before nightfall unless they want to meet the others. Meanwhile, Chapman here is still waiting for a rescue, and decides to go down to the river to refill his canteen, having no idea that sudden death is lurking just below the water's surface. He's washing the blood from his face when, all of a sudden, Kong comes strolling in from behind the mountain, walking straight towards him, which forces Chapman to hide out behind a nearby rock. While getting a drink of his own, Kong senses something heading his way, and that's when he reaches into the water, pulling out a massive tentacle. It's a giant squid, big enough to take down an entire aircraft carrier, but Kong easily tears it limb from limb, and begins slurping up its arms like he's down at the Olive Garden enjoying a never-ending bowl of spaghetti. Because on Skull Island, when you're here, you're family. With Chapman looking on, Kong drags the rest of the creature away as a snack for later, leaving the man unharmed. But there are even worse things out there than a giant squid, and they're going to come for him soon enough. Okay, that was a damn close call for Chapman here. A few more seconds at the riverside and Squidward would have been having him for lunch. He's incredibly lucky that Kong showed up when he did. Otherwise, he would have been well on his way to Davy Jones's locker, which actually gives me an idea. There's a common saying that goes, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend," and that's exactly the approach that we're going to take. By now, it's painfully obvious that the island is full of unbelievably deadly creatures, but Kong here seems like he can handle just about any of them with relative ease. Most of these creatures probably want to stay out of his way, so it might be a good idea to quietly follow him, as long as he's going in the right direction, essentially using him as a giant meat shield to keep the larger predators away. As long as you can avoid accidentally getting stepped on, you can use Kong's position as the dominant species on the island to your advantage, and make your way to the North Shore with his help, even if he isn't actually aware that he's helping you at all. It's a better plan than trying to survive on your own, so if I were Chapman, I'd consider tagging along with the big guy as a sort of bodyguard to keep the nastier creatures in check. Marlowe brings them to the warriors' home, a village deep in the valley that's protected by giant wooden walls on all sides. But Kong isn't the only one who they're trying to keep out. The truth is that Kong was once just one member of an entire species of giant apes, who the warriors worshipped as gods, and protected them from the other dangerous creatures on the island. He mostly keeps to himself, and only attacked their helicopters because they were dropping bombs on his land, which woke up something that even Kong is afraid of, a terrifying species of subterranean amphibian-like creatures called skull crawlers that killed off Kong's entire family many years back. You see, Kong can handle these creatures when they're young, but there's an even larger one still lurking in the caverns, and if anything should happen to him, the monster will rise to the surface once again, killing everyone on the island. Okay, this is not good. Just one battle with Kong wiped out all of their choppers, and half of their men, so if there's a species on the island that can take him in a fight, then they're going to want to avoid running into them at all costs. These hyper-aggressive, tunnel-dwelling amphibians known as skull crawlers compete with Kong for the dominant position on the island. Like most creatures here, they're absolutely massive, with the smallest ones standing over 12 feet tall, while the largest ones are as big as Kong himself. They're no lightweights either, tipping the scales at anywhere from 40 to a whopping 100 tons. seconds. Their titanic strength makes them more than a match for our buddy Kong, but they're also incredibly fast and agile, which means that outrunning one is going to be all but impossible once it's got you in its sights. Worst of all, they're highly intelligent, setting up ambushes for their prey and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The skull crawlers sometimes even employ pack hunting strategies, which means that when you see one, the other one is probably right behind you. That's a whole lot of nope running around on 2 legs. So I guess the most important question here is, how the hell do you fight one of these things if you aren't a 100-foot-tall gorilla? Well, in a fair fight, you're not going to stand much of a chance, but there are some options if you're willing to get creative. When faced with such a powerful creature, the best bet is to focus on attacking its weak points. They use those 2 creepy legs to get around, so I'd suggest focusing their fire on its joints to slow it down, because if it can't chase you, then it probably can't eat you either. The skull crawlers also have a prehensile tail and tongue that they use to grapple with whatever they're fighting. Grab a sharp object to slice off its tongue, and you take out one of its primary methods of attack. Before it can eat you, it needs to find you first, so going after its senses can also be a viable strategy. If possible, I'd try attacking its eyes to blind it so that I could escape. Like some species of snake, they also use the pits on the front of their snout to sense infrared thermal radiation when hunting their prey, so damaging these pits with gunfire or explosives could make it harder for the creature to track you. The best option of all would be to take them out before the fight even starts. We know that the skull crawlers make their burrows in the tunnels under the island, so if you strategically cave in the tunnel entrances, then you might be able to trap them inside. Finally, their heightened metabolism gives them an insatiable appetite, which means that you could try setting a trap by making it look like there's an easy meal, and then ambushing them when they go in for the kill. But as ambush predators themselves, they're usually too smart to fall for something like this, as we'll soon see firsthand. Conrad explains that they're trying to reach the North Shore before the extraction team arrives, which Marlowe says would be impossible on foot, but as luck would have it, he just might be able to help them out. His old fighter may never fly again, but that doesn't mean that it can't float. When they realized that they were trapped on an island full of monsters, Marlowe and his unlikely friend, a Japanese pilot named Gunpei, decided that instead of trying to kill each other, they should work together to get the hell out of there, and began repurposing the parts from their planes into a homemade raft. He lost his friend to the skull crawlers before they could finish, but now that Conrad and his people are there, if they can help him finally get it running, then they can ride it upriver to the extraction point. While the others are busy fixing up the boat, Mason goes around taking photos of the warriors and their village, until she hears something that gets her attention. Just outside the wall, she finds one of the giant water buffalo crying out in distress after being pinned down by a crashed helicopter. Although she desperately tries to help, there's no way that she could move the heavy wreckage by herself, but lucky for the buffalo, there's someone who can. Just then, Kong appears and lifts the chopper up with ease, setting the animal free. He does not look happy to see Mason, but turns and wanders back into the jungle without doing any harm after deciding that she is not a threat. Packard, on the other hand, is still hell-bent on putting Kong down. As they're marching through the valley, he and his group notice a giant bloody handprint high up on a nearby cliff, a sure sign that Kong was wounded in their first encounter. He's excited to see that the creature can in fact be hurt, doubling down on his intentions to find the heavy weapons and finish what he started. But some of the men are starting to question whether hunting Kong is really the right thing to do. Everyone else seems to be making progress, but this poor guy Chapman here is still alone, and he's starting to feel like his time might be running out. He tries to reach the others over the radio, but isn't able to get through, leaving him stranded with no idea if he'll ever see his friends again. The man stops for a break when suddenly he realizes that the log that he's been sitting on is not a log at all. It's a giant six-legged insect, and it rears up to attack him as he opens fire on it with his rifle. The bullets don't seem to do much, but for some reason the creature abruptly retreats into the jungle. It might seem like a good thing at first, but the truth is just the opposite. Just then, he hears a gurgling sound behind him, like a giant amphibian on the hunt, and by the time that he turns around to look, it's already too late. One of the skull crawlers has found him before his unit, and it leaps forward with its jaws opened wide, devouring the soldier before he even has a chance to react. Okay, man, these things are brutal. Poor Chapman here never even saw it coming, but at least his death was quick, which is probably better than being caught by some of the other creatures lurking on this island from hell. He didn't stand much of a chance as it was, if we're being honest, but it also didn't exactly help that he made himself such an easy target. He fell for the old camouflage trick, and the noise made by him opening fire with the rifle is what ultimately led him to his death. Now, to be fair, it would have been pretty damn hard to tell that that log was actually a giant insect in disguise. But after seeing what went down with Kong and that giant squid by the river, the smart thing to do would have been to always be on your guard until you were miles away from this island, and never get caught just sitting out in the open like you're waiting for the school bus. By now, it should have been pretty damn obvious that everything on this island is trying to kill you. You might better your chances of survival by creating a hideout somewhere overlooking the crash site. That way, you'll be able to avoid any hungry creatures that might come to investigate, but still be close enough to know when the cavalry shows up. Like we mentioned before, I'd attempt to conceal myself visually and by smell if I could to give myself as many chances as possible to avoid any predators. The thing about the skull crawlers is that they also hunt you by sensing your body heat, so the hard truth is that it was probably only a matter of time before he ended up as one's lunch, especially since he was all alone. Still, doing anything that you can to make yourself more difficult to find will go a long way, not winding up like Chapman here. Sorry, soldier. Better luck next time. That night, Rhonda pulls Packard aside, urging him to focus on getting to safety instead of killing Kong for the sake of his men. But Packard refuses to give up the fight, seeing this as a chance for personal redemptions after their failures on the battlefields of Vietnam. He's too invested to quit now, and this vendetta is only going to end when he or the ape lies dead. The next morning, Conrad and his team are finally able to get the old raft started. As they fire up the engines, Marlowe waves a tearful goodbye to the warriors who saved his life so many years ago, and the group sets off upriver, one step closer to getting off this island. It turns out that Marlowe here has, or had, a wife and a newborn son back stateside before he was shot down. He's sure that they've most likely moved on, but hopeful for just one chance to see them if he ever makes it home. And it looks like now he just might get his wish. Just then, they're finally able to get through to Packard's team on the radio, and he sends up a flare so that they can find a way to his location. But sure enough, all of this noise draws some unwanted attention. Suddenly, one of the researchers on the boat is grabbed by a flock of petrosaur-like creatures, lifted into the air and torn to shreds right in front of them. The others are shocked, but there's nothing that they can do, and their only choice now is to keep moving forward. When Packard and the soldiers arrive at the rendezvous point, they find Conrad and his group already waiting for them. They've taken some heavy losses, and Conrad urges that they need to get to the North Shore as soon as possible. But Packard here is still determined to find Chapman and the heavy weapons. Overhearing this, Marlowe points out that in order to reach him, they'll have to walk right into Skullcrawler territory, where they'll most likely all be killed. It's a tough choice, but since they think that Chapman could still be alive, Conrad and his team reluctantly agree with Packard's plan, on the condition that if they don't find him at the crash site, they'll give up the search and focus on getting everyone else out of there in one piece. It doesn't take long before they see why Marlowe is so opposed to the idea of going west. As they push towards Chapman's last known position, they come to a mass grave full of the giant skeletons of Kong's family and other enormous species, the work of the Skullcrawlers. Marlowe urges them to turn around, but Packard insists on pushing through, and they descend into the Valley of Death, where they will soon come face to face with the most dangerous predators on the island. Okay, Packard is officially losing it, and he's about to lead them straight into a death trap. He may be the man in charge, but they should really listen to Marlowe on this one. After all, the guy has survived on the island for decades, and they've barely made it 2 days without being completely wiped out. He's not being paranoid when he says to turn back, he just knows that crossing this valley is going to be too much of a risk. The piles of giant bones should make the danger here pretty damn obvious. I mean, one, Kong almost wiped out their entire unit, so anything that can kill an entire family of Kongs should do the same to them without so much of a challenge. There's a difference between bravery and foolishness, and they may be short on time, but saving a few minutes on travel isn't going to help if the shortcut ends with everyone being eaten by two-legged mutant amphibians. Instead of cutting through the literal graveyard, I'd suggest finding another way around, or calling it quits and turning back altogether to come up with a new plan. It's a hard choice to leave a man behind, but they need to do what's best for the majority of the team. Plus, if they don't make it off of this island, then nobody's gonna know what's out there, and this whole expedition will have been for nothing. By now, it should be pretty clear that they need to avoid danger at any chance they have. But they're about to walk straight into the Skullcrawler's lair, and it's going to go about as well as you might expect. As they're walking through the graveyard, one of the soldiers throws a lit cigarette, igniting a pocket of flammable gas that goes up in a giant fireball. Rhonda tries warning them to be more careful, but it's already too late. Just then, they hear a scary growl from something big, and Marlowe shouts for them to run as they scramble to take cover behind the giant pile of bones. The explosion got the attention of a Skullcrawler, and as it stalks around searching for them, it stops to vomit up Chapman's skull and dog tags, before disappearing just as quickly as it came. Thinking that the coast is clear, the group starts to move out again, until Rhonda sees something in the reflection of his camera, and a look of terror washes over his face. Suddenly, the Skullcrawler lunges down, swallowing the man and his equipment whole, only to disappear out of sight once again. But now they can see the flashes from his camera as it circles them in the fog. Marlowe readies himself, stepping to the side just as the creature charges towards him, and slicing its leg with his sword. The beast crashes past him and begins devouring the soldiers with its long, chameleon-like tongue. They hit it with everything that they've got, but the monster sends this guy with a flamethrower flying dozens of yards through the air, causing an explosion that activates a pack of gas grenades. Okay, well, it looks like Marlowe was right after all. Who would have guessed? This thing is going to kill them all if they don't find a way to stop it fast. But it's not going to be easy. It's faster, stronger, and more cunning than anything on this island besides Kong, with heightened predatory senses that give it a massive advantage in these low visibility conditions. And worst of all, they're fighting it on its home turf, which means that surviving this battle is going to come down to dumb luck just as much as strategy. Like we discussed before, one of the only ways that I can imagine stopping one of these things is by landing a critical hit to one of its weak points. The survivors should coordinate their fire to focus on its joints to reduce mobility, or on its eyes and thermal sensing pits to counter some of its primary hunting senses. Conventional weapons don't seem to be enough to kill it without sustained heavy fire, and it's probably going to take you out before you can wear it down, but they do work to get its attention. Combine this with its ravenous hunting style, and there just might be a way to take it out quickly. They need to use what's in their environment to their advantage. It might be possible for someone brave to stand in front of one of those sharp bones like a giant rib, or the spikes on a triceratops skull, and attempt to get it to rush them before diving out of the way at the last moment, using its momentum to impale it and take it out. It's going to take perfect timing and no small amount of luck, but it just might work. And if all else fails, you can always just hide out and let the others fend for themselves while you sneak away when you get an opening. Drawn to the sounds of the chaos, a flock of the Petrosaur creatures swoops in, and Conrad rushes into the gas cloud armed with Marlowe's katana, cutting his way through to one of the injured men. He makes it just as the Skullcrawler charges towards them, but Mason tosses her lighter into one of the gas vents and blows it up just in time, killing the creature in the explosion. The battle is over for now, but they still have a long way to go, and this Skullcrawler was only a little one. After the fight, Conrad reveals that the man that they're searching for is dead, but Packard insists that it doesn't matter, still hell-bent on finding the weapons and killing Kong. Marlowe and the others have officially had enough, and the situation quickly gets tense. So they agree that Conrad will take the civilians back to the boat, while Packard and his men go to get the explosives. The soldiers eventually make it to the crash site and begin setting their trap as night falls over the jungle. Meanwhile, Conrad and his group are having trouble finding their way back, So he and Mason set off for higher ground to scout out the area. When they reach a high cliffside overlooking the river, Kong suddenly appears from out of the fog, standing directly at eye level with the two explorers. They're terrified at first, but after a tense moment, Mason steps forward and gently places her hand on Kong's snout, forming a bond of friendship with the enormous beast. It's clear that he never meant to hurt them. But just then, the soldiers set off several large explosions to draw him in, and Kong turns to confront them with an angry roar, while Conrad, Mason, and Marlowe race to stop the others before it's too late. The soldiers stand their ground as Kong rushes towards them, and at the last second, Packard flings a lit torch into the lake, igniting a pool of napalm that engulfs Kong in flames. For a moment, it looks like their trap might have worked, but it isn't enough to stop him yet, and Kong throws the flames back at them before collapsing from his injuries just a few yards away. With Kong down, Packard commands his men to finish him off with the explosive charges. But that's when Conrad and the others show up just in time, ordering him to stop. One by one, his men begin to turn on him, realizing that Conrad is right, and that Kong would never have been a threat if they hadn't instigated him first. But there are things on the island that they should be afraid of, and the worst one of all is about to show up. Suddenly, there's an explosion from the water, and the Alpha Skullcrawler emerges from the swamp, drawn in by the sounds of the fight. They stand no chance against this thing, and the soldiers all quickly run for their lives, but Packard refuses to quit. As he turns to detonate the explosives, Kong wakes up and instantly crushes Packard with one blow from his massive fist. The insane Colonel is finally stopped, but now they've got an even more deadly foe to deal with. Okay, it looks like old Captain Ahab here finally got what he had coming to him. You can't say that nobody tried to warn him, but he was too blinded by revenge to see the bigger picture. Getting himself killed would have been one thing, but by wounding Kong, he's awakened the most dangerous predator of all. And now, they all might be screwed. Colonel Packard, you f***ed up! To be fair, I can't say that this whole disaster was entirely your fault, but you damn sure played a huge part in it. From the very beginning, you should have ordered your men to fall back when you were getting your asses handed to you by the biggest gorilla that the world has ever seen. Instead, you kept pushing the fight because you were still butthurt about taking a fat L in Vietnam. But maybe it would have been wiser to just accept your losses and quit while you were ahead. Seriously, how many people needed to tell you that Kong wasn't the real threat here before you finally came to your senses? Sure, he killed half of your men, but let's not forget that you were the one who showed up and started dropping bombs on his house. So I'd say that makes you pretty damn even if you ask me. There's a saying that goes, when you seek revenge, you dig 2 graves. But let's be real, you couldn't dig a grave big enough for Kong if you tried, while he could easily pack you up as nonchalantly as if he was swatting a fly. Sometimes you have to know when to cut your losses and move on, but you just couldn't give it up, and now there's an apocalyptic amphibian about to munch down everyone on the island. Real fine work there, guy. At least your reign of terror is finally over, but Colonel Packard, you f***ed up. The remaining survivors rush to the edge of the island, where Conrad sends Mason to reach high ground and fire a flare to signal the others on the boat, while he and the soldiers hold off the Skullcrawler. They make their way into the swamp, but that's when this soldier Cole here decides that he's done running. Staying behind, he pulls 2 hand grenades from his belt, prepared to sacrifice himself so that the others can escape. But instead of falling for the trap, the Skullcrawler strikes him with his tail, sending him flying into the side of the cliff. The monster closes in on the soldiers, but Kong shows up just in time, leaping down from the cliffs above and slamming the creature over the head with an enormous boulder so hard that it explodes into pebbles. The men run for their lives as the 2 titans square off, locked in a battle to the death. Grabbing a tree, Kong uses it as a club and breaks it over the creature's head, but it tackles him into a nearby shipwreck, trapping him as he becomes tangled in the anchor's heavy chains. Mason reaches the top of the cliff and fires her flare, alerting the survivors on the boat, who open fire on the monster with their anti-aircraft gun, drawing its attention away from Kong. Distracted by the onslaught, the Skullcrawler turns and rushes towards them, but Kong rises up from the wreckage and begins to attack it using the propeller from the ship as a massive flail. He throws the beast over his shoulder, body slamming it to the ground before tossing it into the mountainside, but the impact knocks Mason off of the cliff, and she falls unconscious into the murky water below. Seeing his new friend in danger, Kong reaches down and pulls her up from the water, but the Skullcrawler attacks again, drawing his entire fist with Mason still clenched inside directly to its jaws. Furious, Kong gathers his strength and tears his arm back out, taking the creature's insides with him as it finally dies and the battle is over. With that, Kong gently places Mason down before turning back to the jungle, having reached an uneasy truce with the humans, as long as they stop dropping bombs on his house. The survivors take their boat to the extraction point just as the choppers arrive, and Kong beats his chest, letting out a tremendous roar to show that he's still king of his island. Back in the States, Marlowe finally gets to reunite with his family, but as for Conrad and Mason, the government has other plans. They're taken to the secret Monarch facility, where Brooks reveals that Kong was only one of several titans just like him that are living below the Earth, and they need to start preparing for humanity's next encounter with whichever of these ancient gods rises next. If you were caught in the middle of a battle between two ancient species of city-destroying titans, what would you do? These enormous creatures feed on radioactive energy, and after sleeping underground for millions of years, they're about to unleash a wave of destruction the likes of which no one could ever imagine. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the parasitic titans in Godzilla 2014. This nuclear scientist is about to have the worst birthday of his life. It's 1999, and a team of researchers from a secret government organization called Monarch have just made a shocking discovery. During excavation at a uranium mine in the Philippines, the ground suddenly collapsed, revealing a massive hollow cavern hidden beneath their feet, deep underground. Dr. Ishiro Serizawa here uncovers a colossal skeleton unlike anything currently known to modern science. And that's not even the worst part. Hanging from the ceiling of the cave are two enormous spores, and one of them seems to have hatched, with whatever climbed out of it burrowing straight through the side of the mountain and leaving a trail of unbelievable destruction all the way out to sea. Meanwhile, in Japan, this nuclear power plant supervisor, Joe Brody, has been picking up unusual seismic activity in the area, and he's starting to get worried. If anything goes wrong at the plant, the results could be catastrophic for the entire world. So he and his wife Sandra hurry over to the reactor to get the situation under control, but that was their biggest mistake. Within minutes of their arrival, one of the tremors strikes the plant, and Joe orders the entire place to shut down immediately for everyone's safety. But there's a problem. His wife is already deep within one of the reactors. The tremor causes a breach, forcing Sandra and her team to run for their lives, as a wave of atomic destruction crashes through the tunnels right behind them, and there's no way to tell if they're going to make it out in time. Desperate to save her life, Joe sprints down to the lower levels so that he can manually seal the blast doors as soon as his wife makes it through, but he's risking exposing the entire city if he doesn't shut the doors in time. She tries her hardest to get out of there, but a tremor knocks Sandra off her feet, and she tells Joe to seal them in, knowing that there's no chance of her surviving. It's heartbreaking, and that's when Joe hears someone knocking on the door from the other side, turning around to take one last look at his wife as the automated doors slowly close her in. Okay, man, this is rough. Not only did Joe here probably just lose his job, but he also lost his wife. And the most devastating part of it all is that her death was probably his own fault. When he started picking up strange, seismic activity near the plant, there's no way that he could have ever imagined that it would have turned into an absolute worst-case scenario. But let's take a minute to see if we can break down where it all went wrong, and if there's anything that he could have done differently. Being a nuclear engineer is a great career choice, but in an earthquake-prone country like Japan, it also comes with its fair share of risks. For those of you who watched our episode covering Shin Godzilla, you might remember that Japan is the most earthquake-prone country in the entire world, when accounting for its size. That's because Japan is located directly on top of four major tectonic plates, which are the Pacific Plate, the Philippine Sea Plate, the Eurasian Plate, and the North American Plate. The interactions between these plates lead to frequent bursts of seismic activity, causing the islands to experience more than 1,500 earthquakes per year. Yeah, it's fucking crazy. Now, we measure these earthquakes using devices called seismometers that detect and record the vibrations in the Earth's crust, and calculate their magnitude using an updated version of the well-known Richter scale called the Moment Magnitude Scale. Yeah, how's that for science class? In fact, at the time of researching this video, the main Japanese island of Honshu was just hit with a devastating magnitude 7.6 quake, which released more energy as it happened than the atomic bomb that hit Hiroshima, and resulted in catastrophic damage to the local community. It's safe to say that Joe here should be more than familiar with earthquakes after spending a few years working here in Japan. But what stood out to him so much this time is that the readings showed an unusually consistent pattern that was always increasing in strength. He hasn't been able to figure out exactly what has been causing these abnormal patterns of seismic activity yet, but soon he's gonna realize that there's more going on here than your average national disaster. Now, the reason why Joe was so concerned here is because if this seismic activity were to compromise the structural integrity of the plant, it could result in unbelievable devastation to the local environment. Nuclear power plants are already built to withstand earthquakes using a carefully designed combination of reinforced structures, flexible foundations, and specially laid out safety systems that absorb and redirect any sudden bursts of seismic activity. This is usually enough to mitigate any accidents, but if enough damage is caused to the pipes, pumps, or other components that make up the reactor's cooling system, then there's an ever-increasing possibility that the core could overheat, risking a full-blown nuclear meltdown. And that is what those in the business call very not chill. A nuclear meltdown needs to be avoided at all costs, because it can lead to the release of radioactive gases and particles into the atmosphere. As gusts of wind continue to spread these radioactive materials, they'll quickly contaminate the air, soil, and water for miles around. There's no easy way to clean up afterwards either, because decontamination efforts may require years or even decades of complex, expensive, and time-consuming work. Humans who are unfortunate enough to be exposed to those radioactive materials can suffer from severe and deadly long-term health effects, and an increased risk of developing cancers. As such, the people from nearby communities may be required to evacuate if there's time, or else quickly take shelter in a safe location to try to minimize their exposure. While knowing this would probably make you not want to live anywhere within 100 miles of a plant, the good news is that modern nuclear power plants are equipped with advanced safety systems that will automatically shut down the reactor in the event of an earthquake, which should prevent a meltdown. Still, it's best not to take any chances, and that's why Joe here was in such a rush to take the plant offline the moment that he sensed any danger. Since he could clearly see the danger coming, it makes it even worse that Joe's biggest mistake here was sending his own wife right down into the heart of the reactor. He knew better than anyone else just how quickly that this could all go wrong, but he still sent her down there to check things out, all so that he wouldn't come off as crazy to his peers. He was so certain that the entire city was in danger that he was ready to shut the whole plant down from all the way back at his house. So why would he send the mother of his child into this obvious death trap? I wouldn't do that. With all of the technology that they have, he could have at least sent her in there with a Segway or something like a skateboard, so she could make a quick exit if this all went down. That's not to mention that today was his birthday, and the two of them should have been enjoying a relaxing day off somewhere far away from any nuclear reactors to begin with. This makes the saying that being a workaholic is bad for your health the understatement of the century. He may have prevented a global disaster, or at least that's what he thinks, but it definitely came at a heavy price. It won't be long before Joe finds out what really caused this catastrophe, and the truth is more insane than he could possibly imagine. 15 years later, Joe's son, Ford, has grown up into an executive ordnance disposal officer for the US Navy. He's spent his entire life trying to put what happened that day behind him and move on. But his father has been doing the exact opposite, immersing himself in conspiracy theories as he tries to make sense of the incident that killed Sandra and ruined his life. After returning from a 14-month deployment overseas, Ford is eager to spend some time with his own wife, Elle, and their son, Sam, at their home in San Francisco. But their reunion is suddenly cut short on the very first night when he receives a call that his father has been arrested for trespassing at the abandoned nuclear plant, which has been declared a quarantine zone by the Japanese government. Ford here is not happy, but he has no choice other than to hop right back onto a flight to Tokyo and bail the old man out of jail. Once they're back at his conspiracy board-covered apartment, Joe explains that he's been picking up new seismic readings that are exactly like they were on that fateful day all those years ago. He was trying to get back to their old house in the quarantine zone so that he could recover the data to prove the similarities, and hopefully warn everyone before whatever caused the tragedy strikes again. The next morning, Joe says that he's going back in for those discs, and there's nothing that his son can do to stop him. Frustrated, Ford does the only responsible thing that a guy with a wife and child at home can do, and puts on a radiation suit to go with his dad on a field trip into the top-secret government quarantine zone. Once inside, Joe whips out his Geiger counter before suddenly taking off his gas mask. It turns out that this place isn't radioactive at all, and there's no telling what else the government has been lying about. After recovering the discs, they notice several government helicopters all converging on the supposedly abandoned nuclear power plant. But before they can investigate any further, a team of soldiers pulls up and throws them in the back of a truck. Instead of taking them back to jail, the soldiers actually take them right into the heart of the plant. That's when they finally see what the government has been hiding all along: a giant, pulsing chrysalis that's growing right out of one of the collapsed reactors. Every few minutes, this thing lets out an electromagnetic pulse that causes a temporary blackout all across the facility, and it's been getting stronger each time. Suddenly, the outer shell of the structure begins to collapse, as if whatever's inside is getting ready to hatch. The scientists quickly realize that they may not be able to stop this thing if it gets out, and so they decide to kill it by activating their emergency defense grid, bombarding the object with massive amounts of concentrated electricity. For a moment, it looks like they might have been successful. But that's when a massive insectoid creature emerges from inside and begins rampaging throughout the facility, destroying everything in its path. The EMP that it creates unlocks the door to Joe's interrogation room, and he runs outside to get a look at the creature for himself, but he's caught on a collapsing elevated walkway before his son can reach him to help. Taking cover in the back of the destroyed truck, Ford watches as the creature annihilates dozens of workers before sprouting a huge set of wings and disappearing up into the night sky. Now they know what really caused the incident, and it's just escaped to wreak havoc on the entire world. Okay, somebody needs to call pest control because these guys have one hell of a bug problem. It looks like their biggest mistake here was not taking this thing out the moment that they first discovered it. Later, the scientists are going to come up with the excuse that they didn't want to kill it because they were afraid that doing so would release deadly radioactive particles into the atmosphere. But now that they've got a 200-foot-tall parasite on the loose, they probably would have been better off hitting it with a massive can of Raid when they had the chance. After all, let's remember what we're talking about here. It's a giant, alien-looking egg that feeds on nuclear radiation, so it shouldn't exactly take Nostradamus to predict that this was eventually going to happen. The stronger that it got as it consumed more radioactive energy, the harder that it was going to be to take it down. So it's better to be safe than sorry and just vaporize the bug before it even ever hatched. Speaking of hatching, perhaps understanding more about this creature's life cycle can help us come up with a way to take it down. I know that I just called the thing that came out of it an egg, but the scientists specifically refer to it as a chrysalis, and that's an important difference. A chrysalis is the pupal stage of a butterfly. Throughout their lifespan, butterflies move through a series of 4 stages. They start out as an egg, which then grows into a caterpillar. The caterpillar eventually finds an appropriate spot to hang out for a while before transforming into a chrysalis like we see here. And then, once it's fully ready, it emerges as a fully grown adult butterfly. This means that the MUTO here is most likely in its final adult form. And this might be good news. While there's no telling how long one of these things lives once it reaches adulthood, the natural lifespan for adult butterflies is fairly short, with the longest living species only sticking around for about 9 months or so, and the average examples making it only 2 to 4 weeks. With any luck, they might be able to simply wait this thing out if they can find a way to kill it, as long as they can stop it from having any babies. But, we'll get back to that later. In terms of taking the MUTO down, there are a few approaches that the military might consider. We know that the creature feeds on radiation, so it has to find another source if it wants to maintain its full power. This means that they could predict its most likely path by assuming that it will be heading for any nuclear power plants, storage, or disposal sites that are nearby. Their best bet would be to try to hit it while it's over the ocean to reduce the risk of civilian casualties. But there is a problem. Anytime that they try to get near this thing, it fries their electronics with its secret weapon, an EMP. Anybody who's ever seen The Matrix, I don't need to explain this to you, but an EMP, short for electromagnetic pulse, is a burst of electromagnetic radiation that disrupts and destroys any electronic devices within its range. There are several different ways that an EMP can occur, but given that the MUTO here feeds on nuclear energy, we can safely guess that it's creating this pulse through some kind of nuclear reaction. In the real world, if a nuclear weapon is detonated at high altitudes, the large amount of gamma rays released from the explosion interact with the Earth's atmosphere to create an EMP effect. Somehow the MUTO must be able to achieve this same effect through some adaptation in its own biology. Since they rely on electronics to stay in the air, modern fighter jets aren't going to be able to get close, but it's still worth trying to find some way to hit the creature while it's still over the ocean and a safe distance away from any major cities. This could involve using dumb fire missiles with no internal guidance systems, heavy machine guns attached to old-school planes that don't rely on electronics, or even some sort of glider armed with timed explosives. Now that the MUTO here is on the move, it'd be wise for the military to put all nuclear plants and waste disposal sites around the world on high alert and shut them down right away. They should also evacuate any civilians from the areas around these sites so that they can respond with full force if they need to, and try to give everyone on land as much time as possible to get prepared for an attack. Later, the MUTO is going to go after a Russian nuclear submarine for food, which gives me an idea. It could be possible to use a nuclear sub to attract its attention away from land and possibly lure it into a trap. Although, if the trap doesn't work, you're risking feeding the creature and making it stronger, so it's far from the perfect solution. If all else fails and they've got any giant bird kaijus that they've been hiding from the public, it's time to let those feathered freaks of nature loose so that they can do what birds do best and eat this bug. Otherwise, they might want to be able to find some way to bomb it with massive amounts of pesticides, since that seems to work well for farmers protecting their crops. As for Joe and Ford, there's not a lot that they could have done on their own to stop this thing, but avoiding being killed by it is a good place to start. The good news is that since the creature lives off of radiation, it's not actively trying to eat people, which means that if you can stay out of its way, then you should be fine. It's easy to get overwhelmed when looking at something as unbelievable as this, but I'd try to focus my attention on its legs so that I could avoid getting stomped on, and then just get the hell out of there as quickly as possible. I'd say try to steal a vehicle, but the EMP likely rendered all of them useless, so that would be a waste of critical time. It looks like their only choice is to just run out of there the old-fashioned way. But there's never been a better moment to have the most athletic day of your life. By the looks of things, they've already got their work cut out for them as it is. But they're about to realize that the MUTO here isn't the only Titan who's suddenly coming out of retirement. A short time later, a military helicopter shows up to evacuate Dr. Serizawa, and he orders them to take Joe and his son as well so that he can talk to the man about his research. But it's already too late. Joe was badly wounded in the attack and dies from his injuries before they can get to safety, leaving only Ford alive to explain explain what he found. The survivors land aboard a U.S. aircraft carrier, where the commander, Admiral Stenz, explains that they've named the creature MUTO, standing for Massive Unidentified Terrestrial Organism. Its constant EMP attacks make it impossible to track with more sophisticated equipment, leaving them no way to know where it will strike next. Ford's father may be dead, but he'll have to save his tears for later because the world still needs his help. It turns out that all the way back in the 50s, the first nuclear submarine tests caused another creature to emerge, a skyscraper-sized prehistoric reptile who the scientists named Godzilla. Millions of years ago, when the Earth's radiation levels were at their peak, these creatures once lived on the surface. They were eventually forced to burrow deep underground near the planet's core, but as humanity began to experiment with nuclear technology, they returned. The scientists explain that they chose to contain the creature at the power plant rather than to kill it, because they were worried that doing so would unleash a lethal amount of radiation into the atmosphere. That's when Ford tells them that his father believed that the creature was trying to communicate with something using echolocation, but for now, they're still unsure what exactly it was trying to communicate with. After getting all of the information out of him that they can, the scientists send Ford up on a chopper to Hawaii so that he can start to make his way home, but it won't be long before he comes face to face with the MUTO once again. Okay, now this is getting good. Let's compare these two titans to see how they stack up and if the puny humans have any chance at taking them down. First, we have the king of monsters himself, Godzilla, and there's a reason why he got that name. This absolute unit stands over 350 feet tall, which is taller than the Statue of Liberty, and weighs in at a gargantuan 90,000 tons, which is about as much as an aircraft carrier. He's also quite intelligent, able to adapt his strategies mid-fight to counter his opponents. The good news is that he doesn't necessarily want to harm humans, not because he likes us, but more because we're too insignificant for him to even see as a threat. With this massive size comes incredible strength to give him an edge in hand-to-hand combat. His extreme durability means that he can just take as much as he can dish out, and he was even able to withstand the direct explosion of a 15 megaton hydrogen bomb when they tried to drop one on him in the 1950s. When all else fails, he has his signature atomic breath to fall back on, giving him the ability to blast other titans apart with ease. And then we have our challenger, the MUTO. He's a member of an ancient parasitic species that actually laid their eggs inside the bodies of Godzilla's dead relatives to feed off of their radiation. This guy is 200 feet tall and weighs about 15,000 tons. Not too impressive when stacked up against Godzilla, but definitely nothing to sneeze at. Like any parasite, the MUTO's two main goals are feeding itself through atomic energy consumption and reproduction, which we'll get back to later. His EMPs make it impossible for humans to attack him with any weapons that rely on electronics, and the massive claws on the end of his legs enable him to deal lethal blows to his enemies. He's also extremely durable and incredibly strong, making him able to hold his own against Godzilla in a wrestling match. Males of the species like this one have wings, giving them great mobility in the air, and they're also very strong swimmers. As we'll see when they start going after military ships, they may look invincible, but they can actually be taken down with enough force, and have one major weakness that we'll discuss in a moment. Godzilla should wipe the floor with the MUTO in a fair fight, but the bug is able to even the odds by using its flying abilities to give it the element of surprise. As for us humans, when it comes to Godzilla, they're about to find out that he's actually kind of on our side, so the best bet is to just stay out of his way. The MUTO, however, has got to go by any means necessary. The only option when fighting something this huge is to aim for its weak points. Although on the outside it's covered in a nearly impenetrable exoskeleton, the inside of its mouth is left unarmored, leaving it vulnerable to attack. For the military, it could be possible to either trick it into forcing it to open its mouth, and then using explosives to hit it where it's weakest. They should also try to cut it off from any more supplies of radiation so that it can't get any stronger, and stick to weapons that don't need electronic components to do their job. It's safe to say that we've got our work cut out for us here, but there's still one more Titan that's gonna show up to the fight. Meanwhile, the military gets reports of a missing Russian nuclear submarine that mysteriously disappeared somewhere off the coast of Hawaii. They're able to pick up a distress signal that's strangely coming from the middle of the jungle on the island of Oahu, so a Special Forces ground team is sent in to investigate. And what they find is completely unbelievable. The MUTO here lifted the whole-ass submarine straight out of the water and has been feeding on the radioactive material inside. Realizing that they can't keep its existence a secret any longer, the military immediately scrambles their jets, hoping to stop the creature before it destroys everything on the island. It seems like they forgot what the MUTO here is capable of, because as soon as the jets get close, the creature stomps its foot down, creating a massive EMP burst that knocks them all right out of the sky and takes out the power across the entire city, including the train that Ford is riding on. At the same time all of this is going down, civilians on the beach notice the water quickly receding out into the ocean. Terrified, they quickly start sprinting inland, thinking that they're about to be hit with a tsunami. But the truth is that it's actually Godzilla himself coming in hot for a city-destroying showdown. From the aircraft carrier, Dr. Serizawa can see the massive Titan on a collision course straight towards them. But Godzilla suddenly dives underneath the ship, passing below them without doing any harm. Unfortunately, the citizens on land aren't so lucky, because just his arrival sends a massive wall of water crashing through the city, and hardly anyone who's caught at ground level is able to get away. As a SWAT team fires off a burst of flares from a nearby rooftop, they finally catch a glimpse of the Titan himself walking ashore, but he's so massive that they can only see his legs. Even though he's shown no signs of aggression yet, these bozos immediately start opening fire with 9mm submachine guns, as if that's going to do anything to stop him. But Godzilla shrugs it off and continues marching towards his real enemy. Just then, the power to Ford's train cuts back on, and that's when they see the MUTO walking down the track straight towards them. Leaning down, it takes a massive chomp out of the front of the train, nearly sending Ford crashing to his death. But he's able to hold on by grabbing one of the seats, and even saves the little kid who was accidentally separated from his parents. A swarm of military helicopters rush in and open fire, but the MUTO knocks them out of the sky with ease, causing a massive explosion that terrifies the people on the ground. These guys are small potatoes for the big bug here, and now it turns its attention towards the real challenge, because Godzilla has just entered the battle. He gives the old MUTO here a look that says, "This is personal," but we never actually get to see them fight besides a quick news report from the next morning that shows Godzilla chasing the bug back into the sea. It looks like Godzilla won this round, but it won't be long before MUTO comes back to settle the score. Okay, I hate to say it, but the military is totally blowing this so far. They knew that the MUTO could unleash an EMP, so why bother sending in jets and choppers just to get them knocked out of the sky? Instead, they probably would have had better luck sneaking in on foot and planting timed explosives near its feet while it was busy eating those nukes. One thing that they should notice is that the EMP bursts seem to come from its front legs, so if they can find a way to blow those off, then they might eliminate that part of the threat. As for Godzilla, they don't even know if he's intentionally trying to hurt anyone, so why risk making him mad by shooting him with MP5s? He swam right under the aircraft carriers when he could have easily destroyed them, so that's a pretty good indication that he's not looking to hurt humans at all. As a matter of fact, the only people who got hurt here were the ones who got caught in the tsunami, and they'd still be alive if the military had only warned them that a clash of the Titans was about to break out down at the Tiki Bar. My advice? Just stay out of Godzilla's way and let him handle his business. They're lucky that he showed up when he did, otherwise that MUTO would have taken out everything in the military's arsenal. It's a rough start to say the least, and hopefully they rethink their strategy before the next fight. Next morning after the devastation, Ford sees that the military are going after the monsters and decides to join up. They're heading east across the Pacific Ocean towards the mainland United States, with Godzilla seeming like he's chasing after the MUTO, and the military doing their best to keep up. Dr. Serizawa here thinks that Godzilla must be hunting the MUTO, which means that if the creature wasn't trying to communicate with him, then it must have been calling out to something else, and soon they're gonna find out exactly what that is. Get this, after discovering the spores back in the Philippines, these geniuses actually took the unhatched one back to American soil. Think that's bad? Well, wait until you hear where they've decided to put it. At the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository, way out in the Nevada desert. Remember, these things feed off of nuclear waste to get stronger. So needless to say, this was a bit of an oopsie. Sure enough, they quickly realized that MUTO 2 here broke right out of containment, and she's about to go hit the blackjack tables on the Vegas Strip. While watching the footage of this new monster from aboard his ship, Dr. Serizawa here makes a game-changing discovery. This MUTO doesn't have any wings, indicating that it's one of the opposite gender. This can only mean one thing: these parasites are trying to reproduce. This means that it's time for Plan B. They're going to put a nuke with an old-school mechanical timer onto a boat and send it out 20 miles off the coast of California, hopefully luring the MUTOs and Godzilla in, and blowing all three of them back to the Stone Age. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, it looks like we've got another MUTO, and that's a big problem. This one is a female, and although she may not have wings, she's standing at over 300 feet tall, putting her right up there with Godzilla in terms of size. Now, there's actually a way that Dr. Serizawa here could have predicted this early, but he missed a key piece of the puzzle that Joe was trying to warn them about. In his own research, he believed that the tremors created by the first MUTO were actually the result of it using a form of echolocation. The scientists may have thought that it was communicating with Godzilla, but it was actually calling out to its girlfriend here. And there's a way that they could have figured this out ahead of time. The MUTO transformed by enveloping itself in a chrysalis, which makes it most similar to a butterfly, or their close relatives, moths. These insects have ultrasonic hearing in order to avoid the hunting strategy of bats, one of their greatest natural predators. Although it's extremely rare, evidence exists that the males of a select few moth species use echolocation as a means of finding a mate, just like what the MUTO is doing now. Joe had actually already caught on to this in his research, but unfortunately died before he ever got a chance to explain his theories. The answer was right there all along, and if they had known about the connection between these two MUTOs earlier, then they might have found a way to use the creature's natural drive to find each other and reproduce to their advantage, or at least get prepared for the second one's arrival. It's too late for that now though, so hopefully Godzilla can help them put these bugs back into extinction before they wipe out every major city on the planet. After finally landing stateside, Ford talks his way onto a military train that's hauling the nuclear warheads down to San Francisco. But it isn't long before they run into a big problem. It looks like there's some kind of battle happening on the other side of the mountain, so Ford takes a squad to scout ahead before the train comes through the tunnel. Suddenly, the female MUTO rises up from the mountainside behind them, forcing the soldiers to hit the deck. But it walks off back in the direction of the train, and they can see that it's carrying an enormous sack of eggs under its belly. Before they can get to safety, the train comes rushing down the tracks straight towards them, and the MUTO takes out the bridge, leaving Ford with no choice but to jump into the raging river below. He manages to survive the fall, but all that he can do is watch as the monster swallows one of the nuclear warheads whole and lumbers away into the darkness. Okay, just when I was thinking that things couldn't get any worse, these guys had to go and make one of the most idiotic decisions imaginable. I get that their options at this point are limited, but that's no excuse for not thinking your strategies through. It looks like their plan just backfired in a major way, and whoever came up with this train idea, you f***ed up. Let's recap the decisions that they've made so far. First, they took this giant, ancient creature that they knew feeds on radioactive energy, brought it to American soil, and stuck it right in a nuclear waste disposal site. I don't even think that I need to explain why that was a bad call. Then, once the thing was destroying cities, they decide to take their greatest weapon, which also happens to be exactly what the MUTO eats, stick it on a train, and drive it right across the creature's path. Was there nobody with a single brain cell in the room at the time that they were coming up with this? I mean, hello! All that you achieved here was door dashing this thing's favorite meal straight to it, and getting countless soldiers who just wanted to go home to their families killed in the process. Congratulations, everyone! Now Mama MUTO here has a shiny new nuke to feed her babies. Why don't you just go ahead and level the entire city of San Francisco by yourselves at this point, since you're clearly just doing the MUTO's work for it? There probably weren't a lot of other options, but come on! Didn't anybody at least think of the idea of putting the warhead in a box made of concrete or something to help mask the radioactive energy that it's giving off while you tried to sneak the train through? It's far from the perfect answer, but anything is better than the absolute disaster that we have on our hands right now. Only the government could find a way to take a situation like this and actually make it worse. Sorry everyone, but you f***ed up. In the morning, Ford wakes up on the riverbank surrounded by bodies and rubble. Just then, the military pulls up to recover the remaining nuke, and he's able to hitch a ride out of there on a chopper. Meanwhile, in the city, Elle here is able to put their son on an evacuation bus. But since she's a nurse, she's forced to stay behind and help. The buses end up stuck on the Golden Gate Bridge, just as a squadron of Abrams tanks, battleships, and ground units, armed with rocket launchers, prepare for the showdown. And sure enough, here comes the big lizard just a few hundred meters out. The sailors see Godzilla hurtling towards them, but he suddenly stops just before ramming into their boats. That's when he begins to rise up out of the water, and they realize that what they were just looking at was only his tail. As he slowly breaches the surface, he creates a massive surge that pushes the ships away, causing their rockets to fire wildly off course. Panicking, the bus driver floors it through the crowd of soldiers, but one of the stray missiles brings down a piece of the bridge, blocking his path and forcing him to make an abrupt stop. At the same moment, the military opens up on Godzilla with everything that they have, hitting him with tank rounds, machine gun fire, and even a barrage of Tomahawk cruise missiles. But he shrugs it all off without so much as a second thought. In the chaos, one of the tanks ends up clearing a path, and the bus driver takes the opportunity to floor it once again, making it to safety just in time as Godzilla splits the bridge in half and continues marching towards the city. Okay, these guys really need to get their act together before they end up making things any worse than they already are. They keep trying to hurt Godzilla even though he doesn't ever attack them, and every time they nearly blow themselves up in the attempt. Since Godzilla clearly isn't interested in hurting people, then they should work together with him and use their weapons to distract one MUTO while he goes after the other. Dr. Serizawa seems to be the only one who understands that Godzilla here isn't the enemy. And now they're about to risk blowing up the entire city of San Francisco and creating a nuclear disaster the likes of which the world has never seen, instead of using their best weapon and meat shield to their advantage. The worst part is that they don't even know if the nuke is going to work, but there's something else that they could try. Here's the plan. They need to strap some nuclear waste to a rocket and launch it up to the path of an orbiting satellite. Okay, follow me here. These things are essentially giant hunks of metal orbiting through space at hundreds of thousands of miles per hour. Perhaps they could lure the male MUTO into chasing the food up into the satellite's path, putting the two of them on a collision course, and then splat the thing like a bug on a car windshield, leaving only the mama for them and Godzilla to deal with. It's a long shot, but if they're willing to nuke the entire city of San Francisco just to stop these things, then anything is worth a try. Now the military realizes that they need to manually shut the bomb down before the timer goes off, but the MUTO's EMP will fry any electronics that try to get too close, leaving them with only one option: They'll have to halo jump straight onto the nest and get this done the old-fashioned way. Ford hits the streets and regroups with his squad, and they begin making their way through the destruction towards the warhead. Eventually, they arrive at the edge of the nest, just in time to see Big Mama here emptying her eggs into the crater below. Suddenly, they realize that they're caught right in the middle of Godzilla and the massive parasite. The two monsters clash, and Godzilla grabs the Mama MUTO in his jaws, dragging her away into the darkness. With the coast clear, Ford and his team burst into the nest, where they find the warhead suspended by a pulsating structure made out of the creature's eggs. And there's less than half an hour left before it all goes boom. Up on the surface, Godzilla is putting the smackdown on Mama MUTO, but that's when her boyfriend shows up for the sneak attack, and the two of them start kicking his ass all up and down the block. The soldiers can't get the case around the detonator open, so they decide that their only choice is to get the nuke back on a boat as quickly as they can. Staying behind, Ford knocks open the valve on a gasoline truck and climbs out of the crater just as a spark ignites the fuel, blowing all of the baby MUTOs sky high. The Mama MUTO is pissed, but that's when Godzilla shows up with his tail glowing bright blue, and he unleashes a burst of his atomic breath straight into the creature's face. It's a critical hit, but the male MUTO swoops in from behind, just as Godzilla is about to finish the job. This time though, Godzilla isn't letting that slide, and as it circles around for another attack, he tail whips the bug straight into the side of a skyscraper, impaling it on a part of the building and finally taking it down for good. It's a major victory, but the fight leaves Godzilla exhausted, and he isn't able to get out of the way as the entire building collapses on top of him, crushing him under its weight. Meanwhile, the Mama MUTO starts going after the warhead, which the sailors have finally loaded onto a working boat. Luckily, she's distracted by a squad of soldiers firing rockets at her from a nearby pier, buying Ford enough time to get aboard. There are only 13 minutes left, and with no way to open the case, Ford's only choice is to set the boat to autopilot as far out into the ocean as he can get. It works for a moment, but just then the boat's engine gives out, and the mother MUTO is standing over him, about to deal the final blow. All of a sudden, Godzilla grabs the creature from behind. With all of his remaining strength, he forces the creature's jaws open and shoots a blast of atomic breath straight down its throat, burning Mama MUTO's head right off its body. Godzilla lets out a triumphant roar as he drops his entire enemy's body into the sea, but he collapses from his injuries now that the fight is finally over. That's both MUTOs down, but there's still a nuke to worry about. With the MUTOs out of the picture, Ford's boat kicks back on and begins speeding out to sea with him still aboard. He closes his eyes, knowing that he's about to die, but at least his sacrifice means that his family will be saved. Suddenly, there's a flash of blinding white light, but it's not the nuke, it's a military chopper, there to pick him up just in time. Moments later, the warhead detonates, but it's far enough away from the city that everyone else escapes unharmed. As the smoke clears, Ford, Elle, and Sam are finally reunited at a disaster shelter, and they're all happy just to have made it out alive. While recovery teams start working to clear out the rubble, Godzilla suddenly rises up and dives back into the sea, returning to his slumber now that the battle is finished. As they watch him go, the people finally realize that Godzilla was never a monster at all. He's an ancient protector of the natural order of life, and he'll return again when the world needs him most. If a bunch of enormous titans turned the entire planet into their own personal battleground, what the hell would you do? Scientists have spent decades trying to understand these ancient creatures, but when a three-headed dragon escapes and starts waking up all of his friends, it's up to Godzilla and Mothra to team up with humanity and save the world. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat every single titan in Godzilla King of the Monsters. This woman's plan is about to backfire in the biggest way imaginable. It's been 5 years since Godzilla's fight with the MUTOs turned the entire city of San Francisco into a giant crater. And this monarch scientist, Dr. Emma Russell, has just finished building a device that is going to change everything. When she and her daughter Madison are having their breakfast, the entire entire house suddenly begins to shake from unexpected activity at a nearby Titan containment outpost in the rainforests of China. And it's finally time to put her new creation to the test. Deep in the caves below the pyramid, a giant radioactive blue egg is about to hatch. Holy As the two of them watch from the observation deck, the insectoid titan known as Mothra finally emerges for the first time. The scientists immediately activate the laser containment grid until suddenly the entire system goes down without any explanation. This time, it's not the Titan causing the problems, but it seems like the facility has been sabotaged from the inside. Realizing that Mothra is becoming frightened, Emma orders the containment team to stand down, but in the confusion, this one dumbass decides to shoot her with a taser. And that was his biggest mistake. Defending herself, Mothra begins covering the facility in her strong silk webs, immobilizing the containment team without killing them. One of the scientists immediately moves to put Mothra down for good, but Emma quickly grabs her new device and runs into the chamber. The device, called the Orca, allows her to communicate with the creature using bioacoustics. It takes a moment for her to get it right, but Emma finds the correct frequency just in time. And suddenly Mothra becomes docile, as if she can tell that they aren't a threat. It could be the most important breakthrough in scientific history, but just then, a team of PMCs led by former British Army Colonel Alan Jonah stormed the facility, taking out everyone except for Emma, Madison, and the Orca, as Mothra escapes into the rainforest. It looks like Emma's colleagues were right about the sabotage, and getting his hand on the Orca is only the first part of Jonah's master plan. Okay, what a disaster. I don't know what's worse, the fact that Monarch still doesn't seem to have learned their lesson after what happened back in San Francisco, or that Emma here decided to host her own Bring Your Daughter to Work Day at a top-secret Titan containment facility. To be fair, I was just as surprised as anyone when Twin Lannister blew the doors down and started lighting people up. But even without Jonah getting involved, they had no idea what was about to come out of that egg and if it was going to be friend or foe. Probably not the best place to bring a 12-year-old kid, all things considered. It looks like the cat's out of the bag now, or should I say, the giant larva is out of the radioactive egg sac. Meet Mothra, a titan from the order Lepidoptera. That's a fancy way to say butterflies and moths. At 50 feet tall, about the length of a semi-truck trailer, she's admittedly not the most impressive titan that we've seen so far. But remember, this is only her second form. Given time, she'll find a safe place to cocoon herself before growing into her final adult stage. Even as a larva, she's still capable of causing plenty of damage, as the Monarch scientists have just witnessed firsthand. Her giant size allows her to crush puny humans like an egg, along with her several pairs of arms ending in pointed hooks, sharp jaws, and the ability to fire super strong silk webs, making her pretty much a formidable enemy in a fight. Or at least they would, but the good news for us is that Mothra here is actually a friend. She may look terrifying, but the truth is that Mothra wouldn't have attacked in the first place if the containment team hadn't zapped her. Even when she could have killed them, she chose to take them out safely with her webs instead, proving that not only is she friendly, but she'll even go out of her way to avoid hurting humans whenever possible. And that's pretty chill. Now, it is possible to injure her with enough force. Just like all bugs, fire usually does the trick, but maybe it would be a better idea for the Monarch team here to learn from their mistakes and focus on getting along with her instead of looking for a fight. Speaking of mistakes, this station really needs to upgrade their security. I mean, seriously, this guy Jonah just waltzed right in, set a Titan loose, and stole possibly the most dangerous device in the world without anyone even putting up a fight. As soon as she realized what was happening, Emma should have destroyed the Orca before it fell into the wrong hands. She could always rebuild it, and plus, that would give Jonah a reason to keep her and Madison alive, at least until she made a new one. Better yet, why not use the Orca to tell Mothra to fight the bad guys? She could have made short work of them with her webs, but soon we're gonna find out that Emma here has her own reasons for what she did. If Jonah is planning to actually use the device, then he's going to have to attack another one of the outposts. And it seems like you need to be within a certain range of the creature for the Orca to work. Otherwise, why would Emma have risked getting so close? This could get out of hand fast, so until Jonah is stopped, Monarch leadership should immediately put all of their other outposts on ultra high alert. In the meantime, they should check Emma's notes to see if there is any way to trace or track the Orca. like a built-in tracking device, and request help from the military in any country where they have an outpost, since these titans falling into the wrong hands represents a serious global threat. Hey everyone, do you miss the thrill of casting a line, the peace of a quiet lake, the excitement of reeling in a monster catch? Well, even if you don't live near water, you can still experience all that and more with Fishing Clash. I remember being a kid, tagging along with my grandpa to his favorite fishing spot, the anticipation of the bite, the fight of the fish, the joy of landing a whopper. It was pure magic, and now, thanks to Fishing Clash, I can relive that feeling anytime, anywhere. This isn't just any mobile game, folks. It's a full-fledged fishing experience with everything that you could ask for. Team up with friends and compete in exciting challenges in the brand new clan games. Build your own fishing village and customize your dream fishing haven. Oh, and there are tons of fish species, from bass and trout to exotic catches. There's something for everyone. Explore stunning real-world locations like the Cape Town, Greenland, and the Florida Keys. And upgrade your gear. Reel in the big ones with top-of-the-line equipment. And get this, Fishing Clash is now an official sponsor of the Angler of the Year Awards. That's right, real-life fishing meets mobile gaming in a way that you've never seen before. I can't even believe some of the real-life events happening in the US will be replicated in the game with the same locations, where players can take part in virtual competitions and win in-game rewards. Ready to cast your line and join in on the fun? Download Fishing Clash now on your iOS or Android device using my special link in the description below. And be sure to follow Fishing Clash on Instagram and Facebook, links are in the description, to stay up to date on all of the latest news and events. And to sweeten the deal, I've got an exclusive gift for you. Use my code HOWTOBEAT when you download the game and you'll get a $20 welcome bonus, including a unique avatar and awesome gear. That's right, a free head start on your fishing journey. So what are you waiting for? Download Fishing Clash today. Use my code HOWTOBEAT and let's hit the water together. Thanks again to Fishing Clash for sponsoring today's video. And remember, download Fishing Clash using my link and code to claim your exclusive bonus. And now, back to the show. Monarch needs to get Emma, Madison, and most importantly, the Orca back into the right hands. And there's only one man for the job. Emma's ex-husband and former Monarch operative, Mark. Emma created the Orca by combining samples of the Titan's bioacoustic signatures, but they don't know exactly which ones that she's used. They need Mark to help them pin down the precise frequency. That way, they can locate the device and save Emma and Madison before it's too late. The team arrives at Castle Bravo, the top-secret Monarch facility hidden under an oil rig off the coast of Bermuda. During a briefing with scientists and military personnel, they suspect that Jonah's next objective is to capture Mothra alive and sell her DNA on the black market. Mark, however, thinks that Mothra is only a decoy to distract them while the bad guys go for something even worse. His suggestion is to nuke all of the Titans back to Timbuktu, because that's the only way to guarantee that the Orca can never be used for evil. And they're about to find out just how right that he really is. It turns out that Jonah's real target is a Monarch outpost somewhere in Antarctica, where his team makes quick work of the unprepared guards. There, they might find the most dangerous Titan of all buried in the ice, a colossal, three-headed dragon known as Monster Zero. And now he wants Emma to wake it up. Back at Castle Bravo, the entire station is suddenly put on high alert as their radar picks up an unexpected visitor coming in hot. It's Godzilla, and they can tell from his bioacoustics that something isn't right. The soldiers are ready to open fire, but as their expert on animal behavior, Mark actually suggests that they stand down since everyone, including Godzilla, knows it's a battle that they can't win. Instead, he convinces them that opening the shields will prove to Godzilla that they're not a threat. And to their surprise, it actually works. It seems like Godzilla is trying to tell them something, and by projecting his movements, they're able to predict that he's headed for Antarctica next. Which can only mean one thing: They're all about to be in big trouble if they don't act fast. With the Monarch soldiers on their way, Jonah and his crew are forced to accelerate their plans. A gunfight quickly breaks out as the two forces clash in the outpost's tunnels. And when Mark sees that his wife and daughter are caught in the crossfire, he decides that he's going in. He ends up cornering them in a standoff on one of the elevated walkways. But all of a sudden, Emma activates the detonator, causing a chain of explosions that begins to collapse the entire base. In the chaos, Jonah is able to escape with Emma, Madison, and the Orca once again, while Mark is forced to give up the chase to save a team of soldiers who are about to be crushed by the falling ice. From their osprey high above the battlefield, Emma and Jonah use the Orca to wake up Monster Zero, now that he's finally been set free. On the surface, Mark and the others can only watch as the three-headed monstrosity rises up from the depths of the earth and begins destroying everything in sight. A few of the soldiers try to fight back, but the monster instantly disintegrates the entire squad with his gravity beams, damaging Mark's aircraft in the process. It's about to be game over for the entire Monarch crew, when suddenly Godzilla shows up to save their lives. Although he's clearly outmatched, Godzilla fearlessly charges into the fight, but ends up knocking the Monarch Osprey towards the edge of a crevasse in the process. As the battle rages on, he charges up his atomic breath and fires a blast straight for his opponent's heads. Unfortunately, it's a miss, and the monster responds with its own burst of gravity beams, landing a critical hit straight to Godzilla's chest that sends him tumbling down into the crater. He was able to buy enough time for a squadron of fighter jets to arrive on the scene, and they distract the monster with a barrage of missiles that he deflects with his wings, launching Mark backwards through the air and knocking him unconscious. Before they have a chance to turn the tables, the monster unfurls its wings and disappears into the clouds, leaving the badly crippled Monarch team no closer to getting the situation under control. Okay, it's safe to say that didn't go well. I'd say it's officially time to start listening to Mark now. After all, he called this whole scheme almost immediately, but the rest of the Monarch crew made it all too easy for Jonah yet again, despite having all of the info that they needed to predict his next move. There was no need to waste time searching all around the world for Jonah, because they already knew that he'd be going after another Titan. Instead, it would have been much easier to beef security up at all of the Monarch outposts and simply let Jonah come to them. To be fair, with 16 other Titans at different points across the globe and in such short notice to get ready, I might be able to understand how they dropped the ball. But after they knew that Jonah was in Antarctica, Monarch really has no excuse for letting him get away again. First of all, why not immediately destroy or take control of Jonah's Osprey before confronting him so that he wouldn't be able to escape? Then, as soon as the ambush started, just pull back. They're literally underground, so it should have been easy enough for Monarch just to wait for them to come back up in the elevator, or cause a cave-in and bury Jonah's whole squad under the ice. Emma and Madison being caught in the middle makes things more complicated, but considering what's at risk here, all options should be on the table. They've been willing to nuke entire cities in the past to stop Godzilla, after all. Right now, they have Jonah trapped in Antarctica, the farthest away from civilization that you can go without being at the bottom of the ocean or in outer space. And you're telling me that now is when they decided to hold back all to protect 2 people? I get why, but the consequences of this choice are about to be so much worse. Since this is a Monarch outpost, shouldn't they have some way to take remote control over parts of the station? If that's the case, then they could have cut the power to the whole place and left Jonah stuck in the dark, while also removing his ability to escape via elevator. Or shut and locked any security doors down in the tunnels to keep them contained to one area. Even after the explosions started, Ghidorah still wasn't a threat until Emma had to stand right out in the open with the Orca to wake him up. So why not take her out while they had the chance? It should have been an easy enough shot for them to make, and would have avoided a lot of the bigger problems down the line. Even better, they could have brought a signal jammer or an EMP device to block the Orca's frequency. and stop Emma from broadcasting the signal in the first place. As for the Monarch troops, here's a crazy idea. How about running for your lives instead of just staring down into the crater like a bunch of deer caught in headlights? I don't know about you, but with a three-headed dragon about to come out of there, I'd have been halfway back to Bermuda by the time that these guys actually started to run. I'm all for trying to fight if it's possible, but one look at that thing should tell you that your standard rifles aren't going to cut it, and it would be better to get out of there while you could to fight another day. Which brings us to our villain, Monster Zero, or as we'll come to know him, King Ghidorah. This guy is as terrifying as it gets, standing at 521 feet tall. That's nearly as tall as the Washington Monument, and weighing in at a preposterous 140,000 tons. With a wingspan of approximately 1,300 feet, Ghidorah here is the most fearsome titan that the world has ever seen. Unlike Mothra, who's clearly an ally, or Godzilla and Kong, who fall somewhere in between, Ghidorah is straight up evil, and kills humans not out of fear or a natural predatory instinct, but because he thinks that it's fun. Ghidorah here isn't interested in maintaining the natural order. He wants to take complete control and reshape the world for himself. And the worst part is that he's powerful enough to do it. Because the obvious threat presented by just his sheer massive size, he has the ability to regenerate from attacks that would be fatal to even Godzilla himself, making him completely impervious to almost any form of damage. To boost his power, he's able to create and feed off of lightning storms due to his electroreceptive biology, and even has gold-plated skin to help with conduction. His massive wings make him extremely mobile, able to fly at speeds of about 575 miles per hour. Worst of all, Ghidorah is highly intelligent, as shown by his decision to let Godzilla charge up his atomic breath before immediately dodging and counteracting the blast, tricking his opponent into wasting his most powerful attack. Out of all titans, only Godzilla is powerful enough to stand toe-to-toe with Ghidorah, so for now, it's a good thing that he's on our side. And the Monarch crew needs to support him however they can. He doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, but one thing that we do know is that being frozen in the ice seemed to keep him contained. If Monarch could develop weapons that would allow them to freeze him again, then that should help to get the job done. We can also see that he's much more suited to fight on land or in the air. But in the water, Godzilla has the advantage. As part of their strategy, Monarch should attempt to lure Ghidorah over the water whenever possible to help Godzilla out. It's important to note that, although they're all part of the same creature, each of Ghidorah's three heads seem to have a different personality. Right now, it looks like the middle head is in control, based on how it was leading the others when he woke up, so if we're going to attack, I'd suggest targeting the leader first, as well as other potential weak points like his wings and underbelly. It's a long shot, but maybe there's a frequency that could turn the heads against each other, and force Ghidorah here to fight himself. Ghidorah's greatest weapon is his gravity beams, but it looks like he needs to open his mouth to fire them. Perhaps they could find some way to seal his mouth shut with some extremely strong adhesives or wire, and that could take his gravity beams out of the picture at least until it wore off. Finally, it might be easier to focus on the human side of the problem. Jonah's a smart guy, but he still needs a team to do his dirty work. That team is made up of people who live on Earth, but his plan is going to destroy the Earth. Obviously, you can see how this might be a problem. There's no way that everyone in his crew is fully on board. So maybe there's a way that the Monarch team could turn Jonah's crew against each other. Even if they aren't able to stop him, any hitch in his plans would help buy the good guys more time to get things back under control. Mark eventually wakes up back on the Monarch command ship, and he finds that they're already pursuing Emma towards another Titan containment site located on a small island just off the coast of Mexico. The researchers can't understand why Emma would be doing this, but just then, they receive a surprise call from none other than Mrs. Crazy Lady herself, and she wants to explain her evil plan. It turns out that Emma here went off the deep end after the death of their son during Godzilla's fight with the MUTOs, and as she researched the Titans to figure out how to stop them, she came to the realization that humanity itself is the disease, and the Titans are the cure. It's a classic depopulation scheme, but instead of searching for the Infinity Stones so that she could Thanos snap half of everyone out of existence, they've decided to let Monster Zero and his friends do their dirty work instead. Mark urges her to come to her senses. But the woman is already too far gone, and she leaves them with a warning to seek shelter before the real destruction begins. Tracing her call, the team suddenly realizes that Emma isn't really on the island at all. She's broadcasting from somewhere deep underground in one of the secret Monarch bunkers. And she's just shut down the containment systems for the Titan that's being held there. On the island, Monarch soldiers are already doing everything that they can to evacuate everyone as quickly as possible. But it's too late. Just then, an otherworldly shriek pierces the air as the nearby volcano suddenly erupts, and an enormous pterosaur-like monster emerges from the lava. It's Rodan, the fire demon. And like his name suggests, this one is not a friend. At the same time, the Monarch crew picks up Monster Zero, making a beeline straight for the emergence site. Whatever business these two titans have with each other, it won't be good for the people still stuck on the ground. But that's when Mark here gets an idea. After getting Rodan's attention with a barrage of missiles, the Monarch jets quickly make a U-turn back out towards the open ocean, luring the bird into following them away from the city. The plan works like a charm, but it isn't enough to completely protect the people on the ground, as even the act of Rodan simply flying overhead causes a devastating gust of wind that demolishes anything unlucky enough to be caught in its path, down on the streets below. Okay, this avian abomination is called Rodan, and he's essentially a cross between a giant bird and a petrosaur, a group of ancient flying reptiles who ruled the skies about 220 million years ago. He's clocking in at over 850 feet tall, weighs nearly 400,000 tons, and has an 870-foot wingspan, plus a large beak and razor-sharp claws for attacking his chosen prey, making him a formidable foe all on his own. We can tell right away that Rodan is definitely not a friend, although he wasn't outwardly aggressive either until Monarch fired on him. This could have been another mistake, as there was no way to tell what he would have done if he wasn't provoked. But with Ghidorah on his way to fight, it was really the only way to relocate the battlefield away from the mainland and out to a safer distance from the city. Rodan may be a Titan, but he's not an Alpha, and instead falls in line with whoever the current Alpha Titan is. This means that there could be a way to use the Orca to turn him against the other Titans, and work as a teammate for the humans alongside Mothra and Godzilla. It's just an idea. The inside of Rodan's body is basically an active volcano, and he radiates heat that can reach about 1200 degrees Celsius. This makes him extremely resistant to high temperatures, and even Godzilla's thermonuclear attacks. Due to his biovolcanic makeup, just getting too close to Rodan can be deadly for anyone who isn't a giant, nearly indestructible monster. All these years spent hibernating in a volcano have given Rodan's body the composition of molten rock, making him extremely durable and able to just shrug off anything that either the military or fellow Titans can throw at him. He can also generate cyclone-like forces with his massive wings and fly as fast as a fighter jet, while still maintaining some seriously impressive maneuverability for his size. Is Rodan as tough as Godzilla, Ghidorah, or Kong? Probably not, but with that being said, he's still definitely no pushover. In terms of fighting him, it would be smarter for the Monarch crew to have used drones instead of jets if possible. Because when you lose a fighter jet, you're not just losing the plane, but only the people with the skills to fly them. Rodan may not have many weaknesses, but his signature feature of being volcanic could also be the key to defeating him. When water touches lava, it eventually cools down until it forms into stone. This means that Monarch could use water to counter him, either by bringing in specifically designed aircraft like the kind that are used to fight forest fires, by dumping massive amounts of water or fire-suppressing chemicals onto him, or instead focus all of their fire on the membranous section of his wings to knock him off balance and cause him to fall into the ocean. Rodan isn't the only threat on the board though, since they now know that Emma's greater plan is to unleash all of the Titans. Monarch should immediately evacuate any population centers near one of the containment sites so that the military can focus on responding to the attack instead of wasting time making sure that the civilians are safe. It's also important to note that just like Ghidorah, Rodan didn't wake up until he heard the broadcasts from the Orca, which means that they could have prevented this entirely by simply destroying the nearby radio towers before Emma sent out the signal. They also know that Emma is taking shelter in one of the underground Monarch bunkers. Since they're the ones that built them, they should already know where all the bunkers are. Monarch should immediately request help from the military to raid all of these locations, and they'd probably be able to get their hands on the orca in a matter of just a few hours, bringing a stop to Emma's plan. At least it's good to see that they've finally come around to the idea of letting the monsters fight each other, but they're about to find out that Ghidorah here won't be going down so easily. With the bird in hot pursuit, the Monarch team sticks to the plan as he starts taking out their jets one at a time. A final barrel move from Rodan leaves only the Monarch command ship still in the sky, but for now, they've finally reached their target. They're headed straight for Monster Zero, and just as Rodan is about to grab them with his massive talons, the Monarch ship dives underneath the dragon, causing the Titans to collide in the air. As fearsome as Rodan is, he quickly proves to be no match for Monster Zero, with the dragon using its extra heads to hold him in place while blasting him point blank with a burst of his gravity beam, sending the bird tumbling down into the sea. Just then, the Monarch crew receives an urgent message from Admiral Stenz, ordering them to evacuate the area as quickly as possible. The military is about to unleash a prototype oxygen destroyer bomb that will eradicate any living thing caught within a 2-mile radius of the impact zone. This isn't up for discussion. The bomb is already on its way, and all that they can do is get the hell out of there before it goes off. With Rodan out of the picture, Monster Zero turns his attention back towards the Monarch crew. But just as he's about to disintegrate everyone on board, Godzilla suddenly comes to the rescue, body slamming the dragon into the water and buying the good guys another chance to escape. Now that he's playing with a home field advantage, it looks like this is a fight that Godzilla actually stands a chance at winning. He's even able to rip one of the dragon's 3 heads completely off with a twist of his jaws. But before he can even finish the battle, the oxygen destroyer strikes, causing an explosion so powerful that it makes an atomic bomb look like a bottle rocket. For a moment, it looks like the fight is over, until suddenly, to the horror of everyone watching, Monster Zero emerges from the water with a victorious shriek, 1 head shorter than he was before, but otherwise unharmed. Godzilla, on the other hand, took the brunt of the impact, and as the Monarch crew listens in from their ship, he flatlines. The king of monsters is dead, and now Monster Zero is officially in control. Landing atop the volcano, he sprouts a new head like a lizard growing back its tail, and lets out a powerful roar, signaling to all of the other Titans that there's a new king in town. All across the globe, the hibernating Titans suddenly begin to wake up and escape from containment, answering the dragon's call and submitting to him as their new leader. Okay, haven't they learned by now that every time they try to resolve the situation by out-violencing the Titans, they only end up making things worse? They've got me feeling like that fish from SpongeBob over here, wondering how many times we have to teach them this lesson. There's only one way to describe what we just witnessed here. Monarch, you kind of f***ed up. Alright, let's put the fact that they just accidentally killed their only chance at stopping Ghidorah on hold for a minute, and talk about how they could have stopped things from ever getting to this point in the first place. Monarch has to be one of the most incompetent, top-secret organizations that I've ever seen. How come Emma, an employee of Monarch, can shut down the Titan containment systems from a bunker on the other side of the planet, but Monarch themselves can't do anything to stop that? You mean to tell me that they have no plans in place whatsoever for what would happen if someone hacked into their systems and tried to release these world-destroying creatures? That's the first thing that they should have figured out. Instead, they left it up to the military, who spent all of their time making an oxygen bomb that destroys all living things within a 2-mile radius, because I guess nuking their own cities just wasn't destructive enough. Call me crazy, but wouldn't it have made more sense to have reliable methods in place for fending off attacks and keeping the monsters safely contained so that you never ended up in this situation to begin with? This time, the bad guys even spelled out their plans for them, and they still did nothing to prevent it. Even something as simple as deactivating the radio towers that they knew Emma was going to use to broadcast the signal would have done the trick. The worst part is that Godzilla had it, with 1 head down and 2 more to go, but they intervened exactly at the wrong moment and in the worst way imaginable. I guess that we might as well get used to our new 3-headed dragon overlord now that Monarch just killed the only thing capable of protecting us from him and handed Ghidorah the keys to the planet. Maybe one day they'll finally figure out that the only answer is to let Godzilla handle his business, but for now, Monarch, it looks like you f***ed up. So at this point, things aren't looking too good for humanity. But there's one last Titan who might prove to be our friend. After escaping from containment when this whole disaster first began, Mothra had cocooned herself beneath a waterfall deep in the heart of the Yunnan rainforest. Suddenly, the cocoon begins to pulse with blue energy and starts drawing glowing space dust down from the night sky as Mothra emerges in her final form, sporting a pair of gargantuan new wings. Meanwhile, back on board the Monarch command ship, Dr. Chen has managed to dig up some game-changing information about our friend Monster Zero. It turns out that he's actually not from our planet at all, but rather a member of an ancient extraterrestrial species. His true name is King Ghidorah, and in the past, Godzilla was the only Titan powerful enough to keep him in check. Now that he's awakened once again, Ghidorah has gone back to his goal of reshaping the Earth into his own personal kingdom, and they've just killed their only hope of stopping him. Now that the military are handling things, Mark decides that he's going to try and save his daughter while he still can. Just then, he notices a huge burst of sunlight breaking through the clouds as Ghidorah's storm begins to dissipate. It's Mothra, and it seems like she's trying to communicate with Godzilla. To everyone's surprise, it actually works, and Godzilla's heart starts to beat again. But it's going to be a while before he returns to his full power. Thinking quickly, Mark realizes that there might be a way for them to help. Here's the plan. While one half of the Monarch crew attempts to lure Ghidorah back from the mainland, the other half are going to take a submarine down to where Godzilla is hiding and feed him a nuke to accelerate his regeneration. It's a long shot and not to mention incredibly dangerous, but everyone knows that it's their only chance to stop the dragon. The plan starts off smoothly enough until all of a sudden, the Monarch sub is caught in an inescapable underwater vortex and dragged even farther into the depths below. When they finally come to a stop, they realize that they've found their way into one of the tunnels below the Earth that Godzilla uses to get around. It turns out that there's a whole city down there that looks like it predates even ancient Egypt, with enormous stone statues all over the place in Godzilla's honor. Checking the scanners, they pick up a massive blob of radiation just over the next ridge, which must be where Godzilla is hiding out. They eventually come to a point where the radiation is too intense for them to get any closer, and even their unmanned drones are having trouble getting through. One of the drones briefly manages to get a look inside of the cave, and just before it shorts out, they spot Godzilla regenerating at the top of a huge stone pyramid, feeding off of the natural radiation to restore his power. It looks like Godzilla can take care of himself, but there's just one problem. The regeneration process could take years, while they only have a couple of hours before Ghidorah and his minions destroy all other life on Earth. Their only choice is to send in the nuke to speed up the process. But to make matters even worse, their weapons systems were badly damaged during the crash, leaving them with no way to launch it. This means that someone is going to have to hand deliver the weapon straight to Godzilla, and Dr. Serizawa barely decides to volunteer for the job, knowing without a doubt that it's going to be a one-way trip. Okay, putting aside the fact that they've just found the lost city of Atlantis for one moment, Monarch really needs to come up with another plan, if at all possible. He's brave for volunteering, but Dr. Serizawa is just too important of a resource to allow him to go through with this. Instead, they should consider trying to fit the weapon with a longer timer and sending it on an unmanned submarine. The radiation may fry their electronics if they get too close, but when they sent them in before, one of the drones was able to make it all the way into Godzilla's cave before shorting out. If those were the only 3 that they had on the ship, then maybe they made a huge mistake by sending them in at all at the same time and wasting some of their most useful tools. The good news is that they still have the sub that Serizawa is about to use, and it shouldn't be too hard for the world's top scientists to refit the sub to be piloted remotely in the same way as a drone. To be fair, it would take a little more time, but it's worth it to try any other solution before they sacrifice their most knowledgeable guy. The only problem is that the electronics of the drones are damaged by the high radiation when they get too close. In the future, they should work on designing drones that have their electrical components with lead shielding or other materials to protect them from ionizing radiation. This would interfere with the radio frequency signals needed to control it, but I'm sure they could figure out a way to boost those signals while giving a little extra protection to the rest of the drone's electrical components. In the meantime, there's another strategy that I would consider working on. Mark here already knows how to make another Orca device. The only thing that they haven't figured out is how Emma came up with the alpha frequency that calms them down. Why not try building another Orca and combining Ghidorah's and Godzilla's frequencies to make a super alpha frequency and get the other Titans to stand down, or even better, turn them all against Ghidorah and overwhelm him? There's no way to tell if it actually would work, but at this point, I don't see a good reason not to try. Suiting up, Serizawa hands Mark his notes and climbs aboard a small one-man sub. He knows that he's headed for certain death, but it's the only way. The radiation is starting to take its effect by the time that he gets to the other side. Pressing through, he carries the heavy warhead all the way to the top of the pyramid and activates the timer, with only 1 minute until detonation. Serizawa comes face to face with Godzilla for the last time, thanking him as the warhead explodes and the shockwave launches the Monarch sub back up to the surface. Moments later, Godzilla rises up from the depths, looking more powerful than ever, and quickly turns back towards the mainland, leaving Mark and the others unharmed. Now it's time to settle the score. Meanwhile, in the skies over the flooded capital, the other half of the Monarch team are busy hitting Ghidorah and Rodan with everything that they've got, but nothing seems to even leave so much as a scratch on either of them. The situation looks hopeless, but then all of the other Titans around the world suddenly stop their attacks and become docile, with no one sure exactly why. After hearing her mother and Jonah arguing, Madison decided to take matters into her own hands. Grabbing the Orca, she snuck out of the bunker and into the military outpost at the nearby baseball stadium, where she began to broadcast the alpha frequency through the speakers there, temporarily calming the rampaging Titans, except for Rodan and Ghidorah himself. From the roof of the stadium, Madison notices the wind abruptly change direction as a massive storm is brewing on the horizon. It's Ghidorah, looking for the source of the signal, and he is not happy. The dragon immediately destroys the stadium's speakers, but when that doesn't stop the broadcast, he begins blasting everything in sight with his gravity beams. Furious that anyone would challenge his authority, somehow Madison actually manages to avoid being killed by his attacks or the falling debris. But when a strike from Ghidorah's gravity beam knocks her off of her feet, she's forced to throw the Orca as a distraction, and he crushes the device under his massive paw. Instead of leaving, Ghidorah then turns his attention back to Madison, recognizing that she was the one responsible. There's nowhere for her to run, but just when she's about to be vaporized, Godzilla shows up to save the day, knocking Ghidorah back with a blast of his atomic breath. Okay, it's officially time for the final showdown. If Godzilla goes down this time, then it's bye-bye to all life on the planet as we know it, so Monarch needs to make sure that they back him up and pull out all the stops to guarantee that this fight goes our way. They may not have the Orca, but now they know how Emma created the alpha frequency that can control the other Titans. It's not like she had access to any kind of technology or materials that Monarch doesn't, so this brings us back to what we said before. Just make another device. Then, instead of telling the other Titans to stand down, they could turn them against Ghidorah and provide Godzilla with some handy meat shields while he finishes the job. Godzilla was almost able to take Ghidorah on his own the last time that they met, and now he's going to be getting help from Mothra. The only problem is that she's just not that powerful in a fight. But if they had help from even one more Titan like Rodan or any of the others, that should turn the battle to Godzilla's favor in a major way. Besides that, if they have any other weapons that they've been holding out on, like those energy cannons on Castle Bravo, it's time to break them out. They need to do absolutely everything that they can to back Godzilla up before Ghidorah destroys the entire planet. The attack knocks Ghidorah off of his feet, and this time, Godzilla and the military have finally learned to work together. Taking the lead, the Monarch jets unload on the dragon with everything in their arsenal, distracting him while Godzilla charges in for the kill. It looks like they've managed to turn the tables, but as always, there is a problem. Serizawa's plan worked a little bit too well, and now Godzilla is only minutes away from going thermonuclear and unleashing an atomic blast that will destroy everything for miles around. They need to find Madison and the Orca, and get the hell out of Boston before the big guy glasses the entire city. They're about to recover the device, banged up but still in one piece. As for Madison, she's nowhere in sight. Mark's Osprey is destroyed during the fight, but just then, Emma shows up in a stolen Humvee and shouts for them to get in. She's had a change of heart for now that she's seen what Ghidorah is really capable of. And as they're speeding away from the battlefield, they suddenly realize that Madison must have gone back to their old house. Meanwhile, Godzilla is holding his own, but Ghidorah is still more than a match for him even with his newfound strength. As the battle rages on, Mothra suddenly emerges from the clouds, webbing Ghidorah to the side of a skyscraper as Godzilla tackles him straight through the building. She circles around for another take, but gets intercepted by Rodan, briefly taking her out of the fight while she deals with this new threat. Realizing that he's losing the battle, Ghidorah decides to chomp down on an active power station, flooding his body with energy and increasing his strength to match Godzilla's. At the same time, Rodan pins Mothra down and is about to finish her off, but she dodges his attack and stabs him through the chest with a hidden stinger, taking him out of the fight. Grabbing Godzilla with his tails, Ghidorah knocks him unconscious before lifting him up high into the atmosphere and dropping him thousands of feet back to the ground. It's a devastating attack, and for a moment it looks like the fight is over. Seeing her friend in trouble, Mothra rushes in to protect him, but Ghidorah disintegrates her with his beam. The dust falls down onto Godzilla, renewing his strength, but it's going to be a minute before he's back on his feet. By the time that they get there, Mark and Emma find their old house completely destroyed, with Madison having taken cover in the bathtub. Luckily, she's still alive, but none of them will be for long unless they get out of the city. Thinking quickly, they manage to repair the Orca, knowing that their only hope is to lure Ghidorah away long enough for Godzilla to recover. As they board their Osprey, Emma realizes that she has to stay behind, taking the Orca in her Humvee and distracting Ghidorah so that Mark and Madison can escape. The plan works, and while Ghidorah is chasing after Emma, Godzilla goes full thermonuclear, unleashing a blast of energy that sears off the dragon's wings. Stepping down on his chest, Godzilla erupts in an explosion so powerful that the only thing left when the dust clears is a single one of the dragon's heads that he destroys from the inside with a burst of his atomic breath. Just then, the other Titans converge on the scene, with each one, including Rodan, bowing down to Godzilla as the Alpha once again. With Ghidorah defeated, the true king of the monsters has returned, but it won't be long before another threat rises up to challenge him for the crown. Here's a question. You're going about your day when, all of a sudden, a 350-foot-tall gorilla, a nuclear-powered dinosaur, and an animatronic abomination the size of a skyscraper start battling it out for world domination in front of you. What would you do? Die, probably, but have no fear, we have a breakdown of the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the rise of Mecha Godzilla in Godzilla vs. Kong. It's been 5 years since Godzilla defeated his greatest enemy, the three-headed dragon from outer space known as King Ghidorah, in a desperate battle that nearly cost him his life. With the natural order restored and the other titans returning to their hibernation, humanity has been monster attack free for a while now, but soon that's all about to change. As the morning sun rises over the jungles of Skull Island, Kong lets out a big yawn and starts going about his daily routine, but something about his kingdom just feels different. His only friend, a young deaf girl from the local Iwi tribe named Jia, tries to cheer him up, but that's when we find out what's wrong. Picking up a tree, Kong chunks it as hard as he can into the sky until it finally collides with a grid of thousands of small screens. Realizing that he's actually being held inside of a giant monarch containment facility. The doctors realize that they can't hold Kong here for much longer, but finding him a new home won't be easy. The island itself has been completely overtaken by the storm that had kept it hidden from the rest of the world, making it uninhabitable. It's also the only thing keeping him and Godzilla from tearing each other apart, so they're going to have to figure out another solution. Meanwhile, back in the US, this guy Bernie, who works for mega corporation Apex Cybernetics, is getting suspicious that they're secretly creating something dangerous. What he doesn't realize is that he's not the only one with his eyes on the facility. While he's secretly downloading some incriminating files, the entire place is suddenly put on high alert as Godzilla himself emerges from the water and starts destroying the plant for seemingly no reason. Instead of evacuating, Bernie here uses the chaos to sneak into a restricted area where he discovers a strange object that looks like a giant glowing eye. By the time that it's all said and done, the entire facility lies in ruins, although the surrounding area is mostly left untouched. Godzilla is back to being seen as a threat to humanity, but they have no idea that they're making a huge mistake. Okay, well, it looks like somebody went and pissed off the big lizard once again. We've got two different titans with two different problems, and we need to figure out what to do with each of them while making sure that they don't end up destroying the entire eastern seaboard before we can get things under control. So, where do we start? Let's deal with Kong first. Unfortunately, the king of Skull Island needs a new place to live, and to make things even more difficult, we'll end up with another clash of the titans on our hands. It's not like you can just put this guy up in an apartment downtown either. He needs some space to stretch his legs, but the good news is that we might know just the place. First, let's consider who we're trying to avoid here. Godzilla lives in the open ocean, and as dangerous as he is on land, he's even stronger in the water, so to keep Kong safe, we need to get him as far away from the ocean as humanly possible. Guys, you know how it is. Monarch scientists be like, I know a spot, and then take you to the Eurasian Pole of Inaccessibility. Never heard of it? That's probably because it's the dictionary definition of the middle of absolutely freaking nowhere. Although the exact location can change, slightly depending on where you measure from. The Eurasian Pole of Inaccessibility is located somewhere way out in the Xinjiang region of China, making it the farthest point on the planet from any ocean or coastline, and a great option for hiding Kong from Godzilla. It might not be exactly the kind of climate that Kong is used to, but if they can build a giant biodome here on Skull Island, then I'm sure that the Monarch engineers could come up with a way to help him get comfortable out there in the desert. And there are also plenty of remote mountain ranges nearby that he might like a little bit better. This place is probably even more remote than Skull Island itself, keeping Kong far away from any major form of major civilization, and most importantly, making him extremely inconvenient for Godzilla to track down. With the time that it would take for the big lizard to get anywhere near him, Monarch would have plenty of time to set up their defenses and work out a backup plan. The only problem then becomes, how do we actually get Kong over there without Godzilla stopping us first? It definitely won't be easy, but it's possible if we're willing to get creative. Since Skull Island is located somewhere in the South Pacific, the only two ways for Monarch to get Kong that far into Asia are by water or by air. First things first though, if we're going to put Kong in a boat, then we better make sure that it's a banana boat. Get it? Seriously, if you bring Kong into Godzilla's turf, then it's only a matter of time before the two of them end up in a fight to the death. The key would be to figure out a way to stop Godzilla from finding out what we're up to, which we'll come back to later. Otherwise, they could always try to fly him over so that they could never have to touch the water at all. I mean, it worked that one time back in the 60s. Just strap him to some big balloons and send him for a ride. Then Godzilla will never suspect a thing. Alright, so we've covered Kong. Now let's turn our attention to Reptar over here. Monarch has already given up on trying to contain him long ago. What they're worried about is how to stop him from destroying cities, and the solution might be easier than they think. This is really elementary school level stuff here, folks. We know by now that Godzilla does not attack unless he's provoked, and he never has at any point since his first appearance back in 2014, when he fought the male MUTO in Hawaii. I mean, never. Think about it. So can anyone tell me why the military still fired the first shots this time around too? Sure, Godzilla did come in a bit hot, I'll give them that, but there's no better way to escalate any given situation than with a barrage of high explosives. I mean, seriously, did they all drink from the same goblet of stupid juice this morning and forget how this whole thing works? We're supposed to be trying to get along with Godzilla, but anytime that he shows up, their first reaction is to shoot him with missiles. And I don't know why I have to be the guy to point point this out, but in the last 70 years, that's never worked once. They dropped a hydrogen bomb on him all the way back in 1954, and he literally ate that for breakfast. Then it took an oxygen destroyer bomb to even injure him the last time. So what in the absolute is the point of even trying with these rinky-dink little cruise missiles unless your goal is to just get vaporized? That's like finding an angry crocodile in your swimming pool and thinking that you could fend him off with a couple strikes from a wet noodle. You're already cooked! Now, despite this, the news reports say that only 8 people were killed in the attack, and at least half of them were 2 fighter pilots and 2 Apex security guards, which is the first sign that Godzilla wasn't really trying to harm civilians at all. What makes it even more obvious is that only the Apex facility was targeted, and the city around it is still mostly in one piece. Let's put our thinking caps on here for a moment. Don't you think that if Godzilla's goal was to cause as much widespread destruction as possible, that he could have done just a little bit better than single-digit casualties? Look at this guy. I mean, the truth is that the death toll could easily be in the thousands, and there's nothing that we could have done to stop him. He knows it too, but he still only destroyed the Apex facility and then left peacefully. The evidence is clear that Godzilla wasn't targeting the city. He was targeting the Apex plant. And since we know that he only attacks when he feels threatened, the next steps here should be pretty obvious. The people in charge need to investigate Apex cybernetics and find out what they're really up to. They build advanced technology, including weapons, so it's definitely possible that they were working on something here that Godzilla perceived as a threat, and that's why he chose to attack. If they were, then it's not like they would own up to it after all of the damage that they caused, so the government needs to check it out for themselves. This is important because Apex here is a global company, and if they're doing something at their facilities that causes Godzilla to attack, then there's a significant chance that he could pop up somewhere else and do the same thing. Putting a stop to whatever they're working on is the only way to keep the innocent civilians who live near the other facilities safe. And we can't just let them live at risk because a mega corporation is using their power to cover up their dangerous, Godzilla-provoking activities. If they really want to kill Godzilla, then we've seen that an oxygen destroyer bomb is enough to put him into recovery for at least several years. It's too destructive to use near civilians, but they could either use a device like the Orca to lure Godzilla into a trap somewhere far away from any cities, or use one of the Apex facilities as bait after evacuating the surrounding area. The thing is that we know taking down Godzilla would only create a power vacuum for the other Titans to fill, so it's always better to try to maintain peace with him instead. And if shutting down Apex is the solution, then it's a small price to pay to keep the rest of the world safe. The following day, Madison, whose father Mark is the director of Monarch, sees the news report of Godzilla's attack and quickly gets the feeling that there's more to this story. She's already had more experience with the Titans than most people and knows that Godzilla doesn't attack unless he's provoked, but the old man refuses to hear her out when she tries to explain. Frustrated, Madison goes home and listens to the latest episode of Bernie's podcast, agreeing with him that Apex must be the ones who really started the problem. Speaking of Apex, the company's founder, Walter Simmons, uses this as an opportunity to announce that they're developing a weapon that will allow humanity to defeat Godzilla for good. Along with Ren Serizawa, the son of Monarch's former head biologist, Simmons tries to recruit Dr. Nathan Lind to lead an expedition into the Hollow Earth in search of an energy source. They have the technology, but what they need is a guide, and Nathan here has just the idea for who to call. According to his research, the Titans should instinctively know the way, and there just so happens to be a giant primate who's looking for a new home. Traveling to Skull Island, Nathan explains his plans to Kong's handler and Gia's adoptive mother, Dr. Eileen Andrews. But she isn't too excited about the idea. Although it takes some convincing, he's finally able to persuade her by arguing that it's their best chance to keep both Kong and humanity safe, on Eileen's condition that she and Gia will be joining them to to supervise the trip. They don't exactly hook our buddy Kong up with first-class travel arrangements, tranquilizing him and chaining him down to a modified cargo ship that's headed for a Hollow Earth entrance somewhere in Antarctica. On the first day of their trip, Simmons' daughter Maya shows up to keep an eye on the mission and provides them with their transportation. 3 Hollow Earth aerial vehicles, or AVs for short. For now, everything seems to be going according to plan, but it won't be long before somebody less friendly realizes what they're up to. On dry land, Madison decides that she's going to track down this guy Bernie and find out what he knows, getting help from her friend Josh. They're able to figure out where he lives by asking around at the local grocery stores, but Bernie here doesn't want to talk until he realizes who Madison's parents are. The 3 of them head to a nearby restaurant, and after earning Bernie's trust, he explains all of the red flags that he's been noticing while working at Apex over the last 5 years, including the giant eyeball that he saw in the basement. Convinced, Madison and Bernie decide that they need to break into Apex and have a look for themselves, dragging a reluctant Josh along for the ride. The Kong expedition is somewhere off the coast of Australia when, all of a sudden, Gia notices a strange vibration that seems to be coming from the water outside. Terrified, she runs to tell Eileen and the others, but by the time that they find each other, the whole ship is already on red alert. It's Godzilla, and he looks like he's headed straight for Kong. Okay, it looks like we're about to get our first showdown, and right now the odds don't seem too great for our buddy Kong. Let's see how these 2 titans stack up and place our bets for who's gonna come out on top. The first thing that anyone would notice about either of these guys is their absolutely colossal size. Kong here is standing at a humongous 337 feet tall and weighing in at more than 150,000 tons. That's taller than the Statue of Liberty and heavier than a fully loaded cruise ship. Now, as for Godzilla, he's even taller and surprisingly a bit leaner, coming in at about 390 feet tall and weighing in just under 100,000 tons. All in all, that sounds like a pretty fair matchup on paper, but there's more to consider here. First, let's take the battlefield into account. Being from the jungle, Kong here is more equipped for fighting on land, while Godzilla would naturally have a strong home field advantage here in the open ocean. He's much more agile here than on dry land, and his aquatic nature gives him the ability to breathe underwater, but Kong will drown if he isn't able to surface for air. While they're both skilled fighters, Godzilla has a secret weapon: his atomic breath, which could be absolutely devastating for Kong with just one hit. He also possesses natural regenerative powers that Kong doesn't have, giving him the ability to withstand more damage. I hate to say it, but the hard truth is that Kong doesn't stand much of a chance here. The key would have been to avoid this fight in the first place by doing what we mentioned before and figuring out ways to counter Godzilla's senses. Although there's a lot about the Titan that we still don't understand, we know that Godzilla locates his targets through a combination of sight, smell, hearing, and bioacoustics. Countering his normal senses should have been easy enough for the engineers at Monarch to figure out. As for bioacoustics, Emma Russell already created a device for this a few years back when she finished the Orca, and perhaps they could engineer something similar that, instead of broadcasting a bioacoustic signal, works to camouflage Kongs. The original Orca was destroyed in the fight with Ghidorah, but her husband Mark Russell is the one who helped her create it, so that should at least give the Monarch team a place to start when it comes to making a new one. Monarch is also able to track Godzilla's exact location at any time, which gives them a few options to work with. Knowing the areas where Godzilla likes to go gives you the opportunity to plan a route around his usual territory. It also gives you the chance to throw Godzilla off by creating a distraction. You see, Godzilla isn't just going after Kong for and giggles here. He's going after him because he perceives Kong as a threat. Perhaps if he was preoccupied by a more immediate threat somewhere else, then they might have been able to transport Kong without Godzilla noticing. They could have tried using an Orca-like device to distract him away to the other side of the planet, or made a coordinated plan to keep him busy with explosives, trying to hassle him with attacks from aircraft and ships somewhere far away while keeping casualties on our side as low as they can. As an added bonus, this might also help to wear Godzilla down a bit, making him weaker if he ever did break away to go after Kong instead. It would have been best to avoid a fight altogether, but now that it's about to go down, they need to do whatever they can to give Kong an advantage. The first thing would be to augment Kong's natural strengths as much as possible. We've seen that Kong can throw trees like spears and use other weapons in the past, so if they could, it would be helpful to hook him up with some kind of improvised weapon to fight with, like the heavy iron chains from the ship. We've already established that this is a fight that Kong probably can't win, so we need to focus on making it so difficult for Godzilla that he chooses to leave on his own. The key to do this is by using any methods available to counter his greatest strengths. They're fairly evenly matched when it comes to throwing hands, but one of Godzilla's biggest advantages is that atomic breath. It seems like he needs to open his mouth to use it, but perhaps his jaws are similar to other reptiles in that they're made for biting down instead of opening up. Maybe Kong could use those chains to hold Godzilla's mouth shut, canceling out his atomic breath, or bait him into firing it off and then just stay out of the way since it's a limited resource that Godzilla needs time to recharge. Another strength in favor of Godzilla here is his aquatic nature, but we've seen in the past that his gills can be damaged. So knowing this, I'd suggest focusing all of their attacks directly on his gills. It doesn't need to be enough to kill him, just enough to weaken him to the point that he's struggling to fight in the water, which should get Godzilla to call off the assault, at least for now. The same logic applies to Godzilla's endurance in general. He's incredibly strong in short bursts, but his massive size means that he tires out relatively quickly. Kong and the humans should continue to pester him with attacks from aircraft and the other boats, allowing them to slowly sap Godzilla's strength over time until he's reduced to a fraction of his true fighting power, which is when they can go in for the final blow. They might even be able to turn the sedatives that they were originally using on Kong against Godzilla instead to accelerate the process. Overall, there are some things that they could do to give Kong a chance, but we're about to see that by the time Godzilla is done with them, they're going to be lucky just to make it off this boat alive. Out on the deck, Kong starts getting more and more aggressive as he realizes that Godzilla is coming. Eileen quickly realizes that they need to release Kong so that he'll at least have a chance to fight back, but the others are still hesitating to cut him loose. Instead, the military tries to handle the situation themselves, launching an all-out assault on Godzilla with everything that they have in their arsenal. But he ends up taking down their fighter jets and battleships without even trying, effortlessly destroying them with his tail as if he hardly even saw them as a threat. In the middle of the battle, an anchor becomes stuck on Godzilla's tail, and he drags the entire front end of the boat underwater as he descends back into the depths. Moments later, it suddenly resurfaces on a direct collision course with Kong, only to disappear again as Godzilla dives down before crashing upwards into the ship, flipping the entire vessel upside down while he's still chained to the deck. The inside begins to flood with water while Kong is still struggling against his restraints, but Nathan finally manages to release him just as Godzilla closes in for the kill. As the Titans grapple beneath the waves, Kong stuns Godzilla with a nasty headbutt before swimming back up to the surface, flipping the ship back over as he climbs aboard and beating his chest in a display of dominance. Scanning the area, Kong sees Godzilla circling around for another attack, and that's when he gets an idea. Using the ships like lily pads, he leaps across the water until he lands on the deck of a giant aircraft carrier. With Godzilla closing in, Kong picks up one of the nearby fighter jets and flings it at him like a $60 million dart, striking him directly on his dorsal fins, but Godzilla is not fazed. Closing the distance, Godzilla leaps out of the water and climbs onto the deck to face Kong head-on. The two of them trade punches until Kong finally knocks him back onto the water, but Godzilla charges up his atomic breath and blasts a hole straight through the ship, with Kong escaping into the ocean just in time. Now the fight is back on Godzilla's turf, and for a moment it looks like Kong here is done for. Just then, the military decides to send in depth charges as a way to disorient the big lizard, and lucky for Kong, it actually works. Exhausted, Kong pulls himself back up onto the boat and immediately collapses, too tired to continue the fight, but Godzilla is still circling back. It's clear that he won't stop until he's convinced that they are not a threat, so thinking quickly, Nathan tells the others to immediately shut down all of their engines and weapons, essentially playing dead. dead. The plan works, and as the boat sits motionless in the water, Godzilla rises up and takes one last look at Kong before returning to the depths. It looks like Godzilla won this round, but it won't be long before these two square off once again. Eileen quickly realizes that they can't start the boat engines again, or else Godzilla will return to finish the job. They need another way to get him to Antarctica, and Nathan decides if they can't travel by water, then they'll have to travel by air instead. Okay, well, that was embarrassing. In the end, the only reason that they managed to survive at all was because Godzilla here decided that they weren't even worth his time anymore. At least he's gone. But he did a hell of a lot of damage in the process, and there's something that needs to be said here. Monarch, you f***ed up! Between the pilots looking like they were trying to play the try to avoid Godzilla's tail challenge on level impossible, and the battleships perfectly lining up so that he could take them all out at once, not only are we talking about countless lives lost only one day into this trip, but this whole show would have cost somewhere in the ballpark of $15 billion. Yeah, that's 15 billion with a B, gone in the blink of an eye. That aircraft carrier that they were just fighting on, yeah, we only have like 10 of those, but now I guess we're down to 9. Here, Monarch, you dropped this, the most expensive f***up in history award. Not to mention, they brought a 10-year-old child into a Titan fight. And I'm not exactly sure, but I feel like that might be an actual crime. The truth is that this fight would have never happened in the first place if they'd done anything to prevent Kong from attracting Godzilla like we mentioned before. But they pretty much served him up like the goat from Jurassic Park, and I don't think he's going to appreciate that very much at the end of the day. Then, once the fight did start, they went about it all wrong. How many more times do we need to do this before we figure out not to shoot Godzilla with the missiles? It never works, and only makes him more angry. If they knew right from the beginning that there was no chance of them winning the fight, then it would have been equally viable to stand down right away in the hopes of convincing him that you're not a threat. I'd hate to leave the path open for Godzilla to just come in and attack, but history shows that he'll respect it even if you don't try to fight him, even when it comes to other Titans. It might be hard to convince Kong about this, but he and the little girl Jia seem to have a special bond, and since she can communicate with him, I think that he would have understood if they were able to get across that it would ultimately keep the girl safer if they tried to avoid a fight. They knew the threats, but still they walked right into Godzilla's territory without doing anything to get prepared, and almost ended up paying the price. So, congratulations, Monarch, you f***ed up. Now, at least they can get to Antarctica without another fight to the death. But if Godzilla thinks that Kong is out of the picture, then the only thing that he might go after next is another Apex facility. And the authorities need to get prepared in case that happens. Like, they should start by getting any civilians out of the areas near the Apex plants, or at least have an evacuation plan ready to go at a moment's notice. This will allow the military to intervene, if necessary, without worrying them about casualties, and let them break out the heavy artillery right away. Or alternatively, give them the option to just let Godzilla destroy whatever he came for and hope that he leaves peacefully once he's done. Using a giant net supported by several Ospreys and heavy lift choppers, the Monarch team are finally able to get Kong to Antarctica and follow him into the tunnel that leads to the Hollow Earth. It isn't long before they hit the point of no return, as suddenly both Kong and the Monarch researchers are sucked straight into a gravitational inversion that catapults them through space-time itself, before dumping them out into an enormous subterranean continent. They've finally made it to Hollow Earth, the true home of the Titans. Kong and the scientists eventually arrive at the place that Kong's ancestors once called home. Looking around, Kong finds a massive battle axe before claiming his seat on the throne as the Monarch team lands to search for the source of the Titans' power. Meanwhile, Madison and her friends make their way into the destroyed Apex facility, but the device is nowhere in sight. Just then, they discover a strange purple elevator that's still operational, and the three of them decide to to see where it goes. When the doors open, they realize that they're in the middle of a massive storage facility, but end up getting trapped inside one of the shipping containers. With no way out, all that they can do is hold on as they're suddenly launched straight through the center of the Earth. Next stop, Apex's headquarters in Hong Kong. When the container finally comes to a stop, the only path forward leads them into a massive pitch-dark chamber. Suddenly, an alarm sounds as Apex's newest creation emerges from a platform on the floor, the giant robotic titan Mecha Godzilla. Unaware of Madison and the others, Simmons opens up one of the containment pods, releasing the largest skullcrawler ever seen into the chamber as well. The beast immediately lunges towards them, but just as it's about to strike, the mecha obliterates it with one hit of its energy beam, ending the fight before it even started. The craziest part is that the mecha here is only operating at 40% power, but once they're able to find the energy source in the Hollow Earth, their creation will have the strength to rival even Godzilla himself. Lucky to be alive, Madison and the others sneak out of the test chamber and begin exploring the facility until they discover one of the skulls of King Ghidorah that was lost during his battle with Godzilla 5 years earlier. Simmons purchased the skull and used it to create a sonic uplink, allowing a pilot to telepathically control Mecha Godzilla through the same method that Ghidorah's 3 heads used to communicate with one another. Outside, the peaceful night is suddenly thrown into chaos as Godzilla emerges from the water heading straight for the Apex facility. And this time, he's not playing around. With his dorsal fins already glowing with atomic energy, he crashes into the city with absolutely no regard for human life, destroying anything that stands in his way. The Monarch team scrambles to take control of the situation, evacuating as many civilians as they can and leading the rest down into the Titan attack shelters. But the damage is already catastrophic, and it's not going to stop until Godzilla either finds his opponent or levels the entire city in the process. Okay, this situation looks bad, but if they think quickly, then there's actually a way that Madison and her friends might be able to help. The plan is simple: kick Serizawa off of the mecha and take over the controls. This would allow them to take out parts of the Apex lab and then get the mecha out of the city to a place where Godzilla can destroy it safely. Bernie should know something about how their computers work, and Josh here looks like he just might know his way around a VR headset. So if they're willing to risk blowing their cover, then they just might be able to save the day before things get any worse. That might be the shortest beat in How to Beat History. Holy f***ing shit. Back down in the temple, Maya is starting to get annoyed that she hasn't been able to locate the power source, but just then, Kong's axe begins to glow radioactive blue. Rising from his seat, he crosses the chamber and places the axe down into a matching depression in the cave floor, where it seems to fill with radiation from the core, boosting its power. Sensing this urge of energy, Godzilla suddenly unleashes a blast of his atomic breath straight into the ground, boring a new hole down from the streets of Hong Kong into the Hollow Earth. The scientists quickly activate a small crab-like drone to extract a sample of the energy source and send a scan of its composition back to Simmons, despite Eileen's warning that they're once again meddling with powers beyond their abilities to understand or control. The argument escalates until Maya orders her guards to take control of the situation, but Kong lets out a powerful roar when he sees them turning their weapons on his friends, causing the entire chamber to shake and awakening a swarm of terrifying man-eating chicken creatures known as Hellhawks. In the confusion, Maya and her team make a break for their vehicle, leaving the others to fend for themselves. With the upload complete, Simmons tells Serizawa to power up the mecha. His pilot isn't so sure, pointing out that Godzilla will attack the moment that he realizes what they're up to. But Simmons makes it clear that this is not a request, it's an order. Maya makes it to the AV just as the stragglers from her team are being picked off one at a time. Nathan, Eileen, and Gia make a run for their own vehicle, but before they can get to it, they're cut off by 2 of the Hellhawks, leaving them with nowhere to run. As one of the creatures turns its attention towards Eileen and Gia, Nathan hits it with a stone, getting it to focus on him instead, when suddenly, Godzilla's atomic breath finally pierces through the floor of the chamber, opening up a new path straight to Hong Kong. Seeing this as her chance to escape, Maya tells her pilot to go for the hole, ordering them to fire on Kong to get him out of their way. But that was their biggest mistake. The attack does nothing but make him even more angry, and after taking a peek inside to make sure that none of his friends are on board, Kong effortlessly crushes the vehicle like a soda can. As the chamber begins to collapse, Kong grabs his axe and leaps forward into the hole, followed by Nathan and the other survivors. Okay, it looks like it's time for round 2, but this time it's going to be on different turf, and Kong here might not be in as bad of a spot as he was out in the open water. We still have the same 2 contenders that we all know and love, but now Godzilla is going to be in a weakened state after literally boring a hole straight down into the center of the earth, while Kong just found an ancient battle axe from the days of his ancestors. As a matter of fact, let's take a closer look at that bad boy for a minute. Kong's new weapon is over 200 feet long, featuring a sturdy bone handle and a razor-sharp blade made out of a dorsal plate from one of Godzilla's fallen comrades. Besides giving him the power to deal even more devastating damage, it can also be used to block attacks, even absorbing a direct strike from Godzilla's atomic breath. Now we're talking. Since we're officially back on dry land, the environment also works more in Kong's favor here than Godzilla's this time around. We all know that Kong loves a good skyscraper, and here in Hong Kong, he can use the buildings to maneuver around and take advantage of his superior agility to avoid Godzilla's attacks, while also positioning himself so that he can get in some effective hits from the flank. Being in a city, he can throw entire pieces of buildings at Godzilla, giving him a ranged attack. It's still not quite as powerful as Godzilla's atomic breath, but at least Kong has more options to work with here. To win this fight, Kong is going to want to take advantage of all these new factors to gradually wear Godzilla down, especially now that he's already significantly weakened from that burst of atomic breath. The key is to let Godzilla get tired and then go for the knockout. This time it looks like Kong has a much better chance of holding his own, but once Simmons gets that mecha fired up, everything is going to change. Moments later, Kong emerges back out on the surface, where he immediately comes face to face with Godzilla. It looks like it's time for a rematch, and he's ready to bring the pain with his new weapon. Charging into battle, Kong leaps towards Godzilla with an earth-shattering overhead strike, but overshoots his target and ends up losing the axe when it gets stuck in the side of a building. Still, he's able to control the fight by aggressively keeping the pressure and redirecting Godzilla's atomic breath every time before he has a chance to fire. Finally, Godzilla gets off an accurate shot, but Kong manages to grab the axe just in time, using it to block the onslaught as he leaps through the air and brings the supercharged weapon down onto Godzilla's head. The blast is so powerful that it sends them both crashing to the ground, but it looks like Godzilla took the brunt of the impact, and this time it's Kong who comes out on top. Shaking it off, Godzilla gets back to his feet and begins searching the city for Kong, who ambushes him with a sneak attack from the top of a nearby skyscraper. Furious, he body slams Kong down to the streets and begins relentlessly tearing into his chest with his razor-sharp claws, overpowering him with sheer aggression. Pinning Kong to the ground, Godzilla roars directly into his face, and Kong responds with a roar of his own, but Godzilla can sense that his enemy is defeated, leaving Kong in a heap while he turns his attention back to the Apex facility. At the Apex lab, Madison and her friends are quickly apprehended while trying to investigate the Ghidorah skull, and brought before the head honcho Simmons himself. Furious, Madison shouts at him that none of this would have happened if they hadn't provoked Godzilla in the first place. But Simmons only laughs it off, saying that it's time for humanity, and by extension himself, to be back at the top of the food chain. With that, he orders Serizawa to fire up the mecha, but something's wrong. The mecha is no longer responding to the pilot's controls, forcefully disconnecting him and beginning to move under its own free will. Before Simmons can even realize what's going on, the mecha raises its claw and brings it crashing down into the observation room, taking him down and electrocuting the pilot. Now that it's free from Apex's control, the mecha blasts its way out of the mountainside and begins laying waste to the city with its energy beams, before turning to face off against the real Godzilla himself. Although he's able to hold his own for now, the king of the monsters seems to have finally met his match, and it looks like he's going to need some help. Okay, well folks, I guess this is what happens when you let a combination of an extraterrestrial demon and ChatGPT take control of the most dangerous weapon ever created. Is anyone actually surprised that this thing immediately went full Terminator mode and decided to vaporize all life on Earth as soon as it got the extra juice? Because I, for one, am not, but maybe that's just me. Let's take a quick look at this giant Freddy Fazbear and see what we're up against. Somehow, Mecha Godzilla here makes Kong, and even Godzilla himself, almost look small by comparison. Standing at 400 feet tall and weighing more than 600,000 tons. Now that he's at full power, the mecha was able to break out of Apex's control, taking an already bad situation and making it worse than we ever could have imagined. Like we mentioned before, he's now controlled by a combination of Ghidorah's consciousness and the AI developed by Apex. That makes for one terrifying Terminator lizard. It also immediately explains why he turned hostile towards the civilians and seemed to actually enjoy doing it. In terms of armaments, the mecha here features a red energy beam called the A74 Proton Scream Cannon, and it's strong enough to seriously damage Godzilla if he lands a direct hit. He's also equipped with a fearsome variety of secondary weapons, including buzzsaw claws and jaws that can cut through Titan skin, punches and kicks that are boosted with hollow earth energy, shoulder-mounted missile launchers, and even a razor-sharp drill on the end of his tail. He's also made up of extremely durable metals, allowing him to take a lot of damage without going down, and high-powered thrusters for quick movement around the battlefield. One of his only weaknesses would have been to take out the pilot and controls, but that won't work now that he's running the show by himself. With that being said, he still consists of electronic parts, and exploiting that critical weakness might be the key to victory. My first instinct would be to try to use an EMP against the mecha to weaken him. The device could be man-made, or they could call in some help from an unlikely ally, the Queen MUTO, and technically has to listen to Godzilla since he established himself as the Alpha Titan. Perhaps they could wake her up from hibernation and use her natural EMP to disrupt the mecha's electrical components, making him easier to take down. Being man-made instead of biological, the mecha won't have the same regenerative abilities that Godzilla and the other Titans do, which means that with enough damage, even from conventional human weapons, he should eventually go down. Knowing this, I'd suggest focusing their fire on one of his legs first to reduce his mobility and make him easier to manage, or targeting his eyes so that he can't see what he's fighting, because sight is most likely the sense that he relies on most in battle. Clearly, the mecha is more than a match for Godzilla, but if he and Kong team up, then they just might stand a chance. With the two Godzillas battling it out in the distance, the Monarch team goes to check on Kong, and Gia quickly notices that his heartbeat is slowing down. Kong is going to die unless they do something, but that's when Nathan decides that he's going to use the HEAV as a makeshift defibrillator to bring Kong back into the fight. Setting the vehicle to self-destruct, he makes it to safety just as the massive burst of electricity restores Kong's strength. He can see that Godzilla is getting worked not too far away, and Gia explains that they need to work together to defeat this new threat. So Kong decides that he's going to help. The mecha tosses Godzilla through the city like a ragdoll, but just when it's about to take him out once and for all, Kong leaps onto its back and redirects its energy beam, giving Godzilla the opportunity to get back on his feet. Now that they're working together, the two Titans start fighting like a tag team to defeat the mecha, but it's still packing enough firepower to take them both on single-handedly. Just when it looks like all hope is lost, Josh pours Bernie's flask out onto the mecha's control panel, stunning it for just long enough that Godzilla is able to supercharge Kong's axe with his atomic breath. Using his overcharged weapon, Kong begins hacking the mecha to pieces, dismantling it one limb at a time before finally tearing its head right off of its body. With a triumphant roar, down on the street level, the survivors all regroup, relieved that the battle is finally over. Or at least, that's what they think. Suddenly, they hear Godzilla roaring aggressively as he makes his way towards Kong. The two of them stare each other down, but Kong drops his axe, showing that he doesn't want to fight anymore. And Godzilla returns to the water, forming an uneasy truce with his new ally now that the real threat has been dealt with. In the months that pass, Kong finds a new home in the mountains of the Hollow Earth, but it won't be long before the time comes that humanity needs their Titan protectors once again. You know, I've been wondering, what's cooler than a giant gorilla with a battle axe fighting a nuclear-powered lizard for global supremacy? Well, I'm happy to report that we finally have our answer. The gorilla and the lizard becoming best friends, and teaming up to throw down with another massive monkey and his pet lizard. But if you were caught in the middle of this clash of the Titans, what would you do? This is Kong's toughest battle yet, and he's going to have to get some help from his former archenemy to save his world, and our own. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the evil Titans in Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. It's been 3 years since Godzilla and Kong put aside their differences to save the world from the rogue Mecha Godzilla and formed an uneasy truce after the battle for the good of humankind. While the atomic iguana got to keep control of the surface, the big monkey made his home in the primeval mountain ranges of the Hollow Earth. But soon, everything is going to change. Somewhere deep within the Hollow Earth, we catch up with Kong as he's being chased by a huge pack of giant wolf-like creatures known as wart dogs. After leaping across a large ravine with the creatures still in hot pursuit, Kong reaches a dead end, but not for him. Picking up a heavy log, Kong releases a landslide of boulders that crushes the pack before they can even react, leaving only 3 of them alive. Somehow these mutts are still looking for a fight, but when Kong tears one of their fallen brothers in half with his bare hands, they suddenly decide that they'd better split too. It's another day, another slay for Kong. But all is not well in the kingdom. He's still looking for that long-lost family that he's never had, and to make things even worse, his tooth hurts. All of a sudden, Kong hears what sounds like one of his own kind somewhere in the distance, but when he goes to check it out, it's just some weird-looking frog thing. Dang, he says to himself. I guess I'll never find a friend, or at least a dentist. And Kong is sad. Up on the surface, Kong's old frenemy Godzilla has been keeping the world safe from Titan attacks by body slamming them all out of existence, one monstrosity at a time. And the humans have just sent up the lizard signal to get his help with the latest threat. There's an enormous spider squid called Skyla rampaging through the streets of Rome, and now it's time for these 2 gargantuan gladiators to throw the down. Okay, well, it looks like those 2 Titan boys are back at it again. You'd think by now the governments of the world would have some kind of plan in place for when these things happen, but I guess not. Anyway, we're about to see for ourselves that Godzilla doesn't need much help on this one. But as for the people caught in the middle, that's a completely different story. We need to figure out how us puny humans could possibly survive an attack by a creature like this without Godzilla's help in case the day ever comes that he decides to not show up. And that starts by understanding what we're up against. Celia here is a giant cephalopod. That's the group of alien-looking sea creatures that introduces fan favorites like octopuses and good old Squidward, which we can see from the horrifying mass of tentacles extending out of where her face should be, although her legs are more like those that you'd expect to find on a crab. In the time between Kong and Godzilla's fight with Mecha Godzilla and now, she's been traveling around the world collecting sources of nuclear radiation like Dragon Balls, in an attempt to challenge Godzilla for dominance. And we're about to get a front row seat to see exactly how that plan works out for her. Spoiler alert, it goes badly. The colossal crustacean stands about 340 feet tall and weighs in at approximately 20,000 tons, which is freaking huge by any normal standard, but honestly, that ain't compared to our boy Godzilla here. He's a whole 6-story building taller and weighs nearly 5 times as much, so it's hardly a fair matchup. Even if he couldn't also blast a hole through the center of the planet with his atomic breath. In a fight, Celia uses her armed shell to defend against attacks, and her massive, powerful legs to stab and slash at her opponents, whether that's a 100,000-ton lizard or just some unlucky construction worker on his lunch break. She's a formidable beast, without a doubt, but those legs are also her greatest weakness. With her weight seeming to be mostly evenly distributed between 6 legs, damaging even one of them could hinder her mobility enough to dramatically reduce her effectiveness in battle. Godzilla can probably just tear them off with his bare hands like he just ordered the king crab at a seafood restaurant. But as for us humans, we'll need to get a little more creative. We need to focus our attention on attacking the creature's weak points, like her soft underbelly, the opening of her shell where we can see her face, and the joints on those armed legs. Targeting those areas with a barrage of long-range missiles, strikes from drones, or even a traditional manned aircraft would allow us to land potentially critical strikes while avoiding the use of weapons that would cause way too much collateral damage for any civilians who might still be nearby. If we want to get really fancy with it, then we could always try using drones equipped with cables made of carbon nanotubes to wrap Skilia's legs around like an AT-AT from Star Wars, and bring her down that way. And once she's immobilized, we should be able to hit those weak points no problem. The one thing we'd need to watch out for is her ability to release huge quantities of liquid nitrogen from her body, which could interfere with our aircraft before they have a chance to strike. Countering this should be simple enough though. All that we'd need to do is trick her into completely expending that ability with calculated diversions, before following them up with a serious attack. The good news is that Celia here will retreat if she feels outmatched, so we don't even technically need to win the fight. We only need to damage her enough to make her go away. And that's the battle plan. But what about if you're just an average guy on the street who's caught in the crossfire? Well, some more good news is that Celia here actually isn't interested in eating people. She's after nuclear radiation. The threat is just that she doesn't care whether she crushes you or not in the process of finding some. This means that survival should be relatively easy if you're quick on your feet. Just get the hell out of there as fast as you possibly can. And in the future, remember to try and live somewhere far away from any sources of nuclear energy. Alright, now you know how to survive a giant spider squid attack. Sound good? Now it's time to get back to the action, and with Godzilla on our side, we're about to see that Celia won't be a threat for very long anyway. Calling all history buffs and military minds. Buckle up, because War Thunder is your ultimate battlefield. This free-to-play, cross-platform behemoth, available on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, lets you command legendary war machines across massive historical battles. From the scorching deserts of Africa to the frozen tundra of Alaska, you'll decide the fate of nations. Become a valiant tank commander, a daring pilot soaring through the skies, or a cunning captain steering a formidable warship. War Thunder boasts over 2,500 meticulously detailed vehicles from 10 major nations, each of which has unique vehicle skins to personalize your arsenal. But War Thunder isn't just about collecting cool tanks. It lets you experience the evolution of warfare. From the rickety biplanes to the supersonic jets and unstoppable main battle tanks of today. Prepare to be blown away by stunning visuals, realistic sound effects, and incredibly detailed vehicles that truly put you in the driver's seat. War Thunder features one of the most sophisticated damage models in gaming. Every vehicle is meticulously modeled, with engines, fuel tanks, weapons, and crew all vulnerable to damage. Different types of armor, shells, and missiles behave just like their real-world counterparts. Love multiplayer? Join a thriving community of over 70 million players and embark on epic PvP battles. Whether you're a lone wolf or a team player, War Thunder offers a wealth of content for all skill levels. There are even 3 distinct game modes to choose from. Arcade. Fast-paced matches with enhanced vehicle performance and simplified physics, perfect for quick bursts of action. Realistic, the perfect middle ground, balancing intensity and authenticity for a truly immersive experience. And Simulator, the ultimate challenge for hardcore players, with no assists and a focus on historical accuracy. The best part? You don't need fancy flight sticks or other racing wheels. War Thunder is fully playable with just your mouse and keyboard or controller, even in simulator mode. Plus, the in-house developed Dagger engine ensures a lag-free experience with impressive visuals and high frame rates even on lower-end machines. Download War Thunder absolutely free today by clicking the link in the description and dive into a world of unmatched action. And if you sign up today using my link, new players or people who haven't played in 6 months get a free bonus pack including multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to check out the link in the description for bonus content and to join the ever-growing War Thunder community. I'll see you guys on the battlefield. And now, back to the show. Skyla here is stomping through the streets, obliterating anyone who's unlucky enough to get in her way, but that's when Godzilla shows up and absolute body checks the crap out of her, grabbing the creature by one of her legs and tossing her several hundred feet through the air. As Skyla struggles to get to her feet, Godzilla leaps on top of her and fires a blast of his atomic breath straight into her face, blowing the creature into a shower of yellow slime and practically ending the fight before it even started. While in class later that same day, Gia, the last survivor of the Skull Island Iwi tribe and Kong's best human friend, slips into a daydream where she ends up drawing 3 strange black pyramids all over her desk. Back at home, Eileen notices something strange. The girl's drawings seem to match up exactly with unusual seismic readings that have recently been originating from somewhere within the Hollow Earth. Searching for answers, she travels to Miami and recruits her old friend, Titan podcaster Bernie Hayes, who agrees to help her on the sole condition that she takes him along on the next field trip to the Hollow Earth. Across the ocean on the island of Barbados, Kong suddenly emerges from the Hollow Earth for the first time since he and Godzilla fought 3 years ago. He's looking for some help with that pesky bad tooth. And with the help of some sedatives and a giant flying crane vehicle, Eileen's former situationship, Titan veterinarian Trapper Beasley, is able to yank the thing out and replace it with a custom-made carbon composite fang. Just then, Eileen receives an urgent update that Bernie has made a breakthrough. After comparing the seismic charts to those from past Titan events, he's realized that this is more than just some random pattern, and he thinks that something down in the Hollow Earth is calling for their help. Whatever's going on, they need to get to the bottom of it before the government steps in and makes the situation even worse. Gia realizes what's happening and somehow manages to convince Eileen that she should come along too. So the 4 of them climb aboard an upgraded Hollow Earth aerial vehicle, or HEAV for short, piloted by no-nonsense Monarch operative Mikhail, and prepare to follow Kong through the tunnel down into the Hollow Earth. Okay, now hold on just a damn minute. These geniuses aren't seriously about to do what it looks like they're about to do, right? Call me crazy, but I can't be the only one who sees that it's an absolutely terrible idea to bring along an actual child for this death mission, right? Then we have Bernie here, who's been right about everything so far and is arguably one of the most useful people on the planet when it comes to this kind of stuff. And Eileen was about to leave him behind because the trip would be too dangerous. But it didn't take more than a 1-minute conversation with Gia to convince her that it was perfectly fine to bring a 13-year-old kid into the land that time forgot. I'm sorry, but that's genuinely a dangerous level of stupidity right there. You know, I'm not with CPS or anything, but I'm pretty sure that bringing Gia down there qualifies as some kind of crime. Probably several kinds, actually. Besides the fact that they have to go through a full-blown gravitational inversion just to get there, which will turn her into Gia's soup if the slightest thing goes wrong, the place is also full of literally the most dangerous creatures that have ever existed, and we don't even have the slightest idea of the extent of what's actually down there. That's bad enough, but the worst part is that we've already gone through this once before. Hey, Dr. Eileen, in case I need to remind you, last time little Gia here was almost killed by a terrifying bat monster, held hostage by a team of heavily armed mercenaries, attacked by a flock of killer chickens, and then almost killed when a giant lizard used his atomic breath to bore a hole straight to the center of the Earth. The truth is that she's up there with Jonas from the Meg and Jerry from World War Z in terms of plot armor, but we can't rely on that forever. Later, we're going to find out that Gia here is actually a key component to saving the world, but they have no way of knowing it right now. At best, the one and only skill that she could possibly bring to the table is her telepathic connection to Kong. So just bring a huge iPad or something so she can translate for him while staying safely back in a bunker somewhere on the surface. They haven't been able to get in contact with the outpost down there, which is a sure sign of trouble on its own, and plus, they're going down to check out a distress call. You don't have to answer a distress call with a team of 2 untrained scientists, a podcaster, a 13-year-old kid, and 1 guy with a weapon. Of course, having a giant gorilla for a bodyguard is a good start, but send some drones down there to scope out the place first, or at least go in with more backup from people who are trained and equipped to handle whatever you run into. They should have also equipped the HEAVs with defensive countermeasures to protect them from attacks, and an autopilot system that will remember how they got there and take them out on the fastest route back to the surface if something goes wrong. You know, for some of the smartest minds on Earth, they sure know how to put themselves in harm's way, and it won't be long before they realize that they really should have planned this out a bit more. The crew plunges through the gravitational inversion as the very laws of space-time disintegrate around them into a kaleidoscope of indescribable sounds and colors, until suddenly they're jettisoned out from the opposite end and into the vast uncharted lands of the Hollow Earth. Everybody seems to be holding up alright, except for poor Bernie here, who looks like he barely made it through alive. As they follow Kong across the plains, they're quickly surrounded by a flock of large flying creatures called verticins. But by now, the researchers have learned to use these creatures to their advantage. They activate the ship's adaptive camouflage, allowing them to blend in with the group. Up on the surface, Godzilla emerges at a nuclear facility somewhere in France, where he begins to absorb the radiation as if he's charging his power for some unknown threat. As usual, the smooth brains in the government decide to send some drones after him, but he takes them all down with a powerful nuclear pulse before moving on to his next target. The research team eventually arrives at the Hollow Earth outpost, only to find that the place has already been completely destroyed with no survivors to explain what happened. Searching the wreckage, Eileen notices a giant bloody handprint on the cliffside behind them. She can immediately tell that it doesn't belong to Kong, but they decide that they better get out of there before whatever did this comes back. Meanwhile, Kong returns to his mountainside cave, where he retrieves his trusty battle axe and uses it to descend down the walls deep into a glowing blue ravine. Reaching the bottom, he finds himself in a cave full of glowing crystals and piles of bones belonging to his species. That's when he notices another exit beneath a waterfall, and after passing through it, he realizes that he's found an entire unexplored section of the Hollow Earth, stretching away into the fog for miles beyond what he can see. Suddenly, Kong readies his weapon as he sees a large figure approaching him from out of the fog, but to his surprise, it's just this little baby guy named Suko. Shocked to finally see another member of his species, Kong reaches out his hand as a gesture of friendship, but the little sucker chomps his finger and takes off. Before Kong can get a hold of him, 3 more adult apes ambush him from out of nowhere, and Kong here is forced to give these guys the business, to show them that he isn't one to be messed with, even using little Suko as an improvised weapon to slap the others around. Okay, well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. It looks like Kong here finally found some members of his own species. Although this probably wasn't the welcome wagon that he was hoping for. Now, anyone else might be in some serious trouble here, but clearly, Kong Daddy is more than a match for even 3 of these jabronis at the same time. Still though, you keep adding to their numbers, and there might come a time when he's facing a battle that even Kong can't win through brute strength alone. So let's take a look at these guys and compare them to their real-life counterparts to see how he might approach things a bit differently during the next encounter. Known to the Iwi tribe as the Great Apes, they were initially respected as the protectors of humanity until they were taken over by an evil king, who we'll be meeting for ourselves soon enough. Under this new leader, the apes clashed with Godzilla and lost. So he imprisoned them here in the Hollow Earth, where they've remained trapped for thousands of years ever since. There aren't many that are nearly as big or as strong as Kong, but what they lack in raw power, they more than make up for in terms of sheer numbers and battlefield tactics. As primates, they're naturally a highly social and intelligent species, and this intelligence gives them the ability to work as a group, and even set up ambushes for their enemies like we've just seen here. The same tricks that worked on the wart dogs won't necessarily work on these guys, and Kong can't fight them all at the same time, so he may need to take a more diplomatic approach the next time around. One thing that you might have noticed about these guys is that each of them are marked with a red stripe of war paint across their bodies. This signifies their loyalty to their leader, an evil king who we mentioned before. Just like we're seeing here, most species of real-world primates are naturally highly social animals. In the wild, the 2 species that Kong and the other great apes are most similar to are gorillas and chimpanzees, which also form a tightly knit community within complex social structures. The The leader of these groups is typically a dominant male who maintains his position by not only being the strongest and the biggest, but also the most socially intelligent. If you're familiar with the dynamics of the TikTok Riz party, then you should already have an understanding of how this works. Primates are highly territorial, and when a solo dominant male like Kong shows up in town, you can almost guarantee that he's going to have to throw hands with whoever the current leader is. This group leader will likely see Kong as a threat, which could result in him getting a beatdown from the entire squad if he isn't careful. But there's a way that he might be able to turn the odds in his favor before the next fight even starts. In the wild, subordinate males often attempt to rally support from other members of the group before openly challenging the leader for dominance. This is done by forming mutual alliances with the females and the younger males of the group by displaying qualities that indicate the challenger would be a better leader than the male who is currently in power. With this in mind, Kong could send Zuko here back to the group first to secretly spread the word among the other apes, and start trying to rally them all against the current leader as an easy way for him to get the upper hand. As it stands, Kong can deal with these guys no problem, but we're going to see soon enough that their boss is not the type of guy who you want to take lightly. And Kong's going to need all of the help that he could get to finally set his people free. In the scuffle, one of the adults tumbles over the edge of a cliff and Kong saves him just in time. But when the dumbass tries to shank Kong instead of saying thank you, he decides that he's done playing nice, and effortlessly Spartan kicks him back into the abyss. Seeing this, the group's leader, a scraggly-looking ape called the One-Eye, flees back towards wherever they came from, but not before Kong chunks a heavy stone and hits him with a direct headshot as his way of saying see you again soon. With the other adults taken care of, that leaves just Kong and baby Zuko, and the big guy orders the little orange runt to show him where the others of his kind are hiding out. Back aboard the HEAV, the research team is suddenly hit with another pulse that nearly knocks them out of the air. They're able to trace the origin back to a nearby ridge, where they decide to land as close as possible before setting out to find the source on foot. After walking for a while, Trapper abruptly gets the feeling that they're in danger and tells the rest of the group to freeze. Mikhail orders them to keep it moving as he hasn't picked up anything on his thermal scanner, when all of a sudden, he's devoured by a sentient tree right before their very eyes, and the others take off running deeper into the forest. Okay, well, that didn't take very long. These 5 idiots here decided to go for a little nature walk through a more dangerous version of Jurassic Park with nothing but their hopes and dreams, and wouldn't you know it, the whole thing went horribly wrong. Wow. Who could have seen that one coming? You know, besides anyone who thought it through for approximately 2 seconds. But I think now that someone's just been eaten alive by an evil tree, I think it's officially safe to say that you 4 have seriously up. Excuse me, but Sam Jackson's ghost from Skull Island would like a word about that one. A whole squadron's worth of trained soldiers who were armed to the teeth with explosives and weapons couldn't survive the training wheels version of this place back in the 70s. They're just lucky that the first creature they ran into was a meat-eating tree and not something like the skull crawlers that can actually move around, or they'd have all been dead before they even knew what bit them. Then we've got the so-called animal expert over here letting himself get bit by an enormous mosquito, all to prove some kind of point about how all creatures need to coexist, or some dumb like that. You don't need to speedrun getting super malaria just to show how in touch with nature that you are. I'd go get your blood looked at by a real doctor immediately once you're back on the surface. That is, if the 4 of you are lucky enough to even make it back at all. Now, the only guy with a weapon is dead, and the guy who's supposed to have the best survival skills is out contracting new bloodborne pathogens like a human petri dish. But somehow, I've got a feeling that these clowns will probably still pull through. One thing's for sure though, they've done everything that they possibly can to put themselves in terrible danger so far. And all that I can say to that is, you up. Eventually, the 4 survivors make a shocking discovery. Deep within the jungle, they come across a cluster of stone structures that are undeniably the work of the Iwi tribe. And Jia activates a hidden button that releases a flow of water, which leads them away to a strange organic barrier in a cliff wall. Pressing against it, Jia realizes that she can actually pull the barrier open, and when they look inside, they discover a massive chamber containing 6 glowing crystal pyramids. the same ones that Gia was seeing in her dreams. This must be the source of the distress call, so they pass through the barrier to find out what's hiding on the other side. Meanwhile, Godzilla arrives at the scene of his next rumble, the Arctic lair of the Titan Tiamat. He's there with the intention of supercharging himself from the remarkable source of Tiamat's power. The Monarch team that's tracking him is nearly caught in the crossfire as Godzilla rings the doorbell by unleashing a blast of atomic breath into Tiamat's cave, and sure enough, the Titan emerges from where it was hiding, ready for a fight to the death, but that was her biggest mistake. The battle starts off with Tiamat attempting to constrict Godzilla using her serpentine body, but Godzilla chomps off a part of her flesh with his powerful jaws, before firing another blast from his laser and slicing the Titan's body into a dozen separate pieces. Godzilla swims into Tiamat's lair towards the source of her power. Back down in the Hollow Earth, the research team is suddenly surrounded by a group of Iwi warriors, but their leader recognizes Gia as being one of their own and leads them to the base of the pyramids where an entire hidden culture of their people has been living uncontacted for thousands of years. Looking up, Eileen notices that the ceiling of the cave is full of previously undiscovered portals that could lead to anywhere up on the surface. That's when the Iwi Queen steps forward and signals for Gia to come closer. The two of them communicate telepathically, and now it's clear that these are the people who sent the distress call. But Bernie wisely asks the question, if they've been able to survive in the Hollow Earth for this long, then what exactly could they be afraid of? After traveling for a while, Zuko and Kong cross over a colossal skeleton bridge into this Bowser's Castle-looking area that might as well have a big sign that says, "Bad guy this way." It isn't long before they arrive at the end of the road, a massive cave where, to Kong's dismay, he finds countless others like him being forced to work in the mines. Noticing his presence, one of the overseer apes starts getting in Kong's face, but Kong drops his ass with a single earth-shaking punch. The commotion sends a shockwave through the crowd, and now Kong officially has the attention of the group's tyrannical leader, a big orange who the Iwi call the Scar King. It's immediately clear that this cave ain't big enough for the two of them, and with Kong showing no signs of backing down, they square up to settle who's really king of the Hollow Earth. Okay, remember the evil boss that we talked about before? This is him, and boy, is he ugly. Now, the Scar King here might be the Chad Alpha, but Kong is the true Sigma, and he's about to show him how they do things back on Skull Island. It won't be easy though, so before we get into the fight, let's break down how these two match up and see if Kong can give himself the advantage. In this corner, we have our challenger, Kong. You know him, you love him, he's the big monkey. What else is there to say? Our boy's 360 feet tall and weighs close to 160,000 tons. He's agile, durable, smart, hits with the strength of a 4.2 magnitude earthquake, and even comes equipped with his massive battle axe, which he can apparently swing at about 62 miles per hour. I don't have the physics degree to tell you how much power is behind that, but he could probably cut an aircraft carrier in half if he got a clean hit. Am I right? Or am I right? Or am I wrong? And in the opposite corner, the evil Scar King. Boo! We hate him. At 318 feet tall, he's a little bit shorter than Kong, and also a lot less beefed up. It seems like Kong here should be able to wipe the floor with this guy, but don't let his looks fool you. He's every bit as durable as Kong, and powerful enough to hold his own in a fight. The Scar King's long, orangutan-like arms and legs and more slender build make him extremely mobile, giving him the ability to outmaneuver Kong as he tries to stay out of his reach. To make matters even worse, his signature weapon, the Whip Slash, allows him to deal devastating attacks from a long range away, and even has a secret use that we'll find out about very soon. Right now, it looks like an even fight, but there are still a few strategies that Kong can use to swing the odds in his favor. When it comes to the Scar King's whip, it looks like the key here would be to dodge around it, and Kong should be careful to avoid getting his own weapon bound up by it, and if he can, try to catch the whip with one hand, and then quickly use the axe to slice through it, taking away the sharp crystal that's the most dangerous part. With this in mind, he should try fighting defensively until his opponent wears himself out, and then attack when he gets tired, and then go straight in for the finisher. Kong could also use the environment to his advantage by trying to throw him into lava, or turn to psychological warfare and exploit his cockiness by pretending to be defeated before sneak attacking him when he predictably stops to gloat. You see, we've thought of everything. We've thought of every option here. Bottom line, after all of the other battles that Kong's been in, he should be able to take this guy on with ease. But the Scar King doesn't fight fair. He has a secret weapon, and this time, it's going to be more than our buddy Kong can handle. Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha! Star King initiates the fight by lashing out at Kong with his whip, while Kong slips his attacks and tries his best to close the distance. After knocking away Kong's axe, Star King tries to choke him out, but Kong flips him over his shoulder and body slams him to the ground. Realizing that he's met his match, the evil ape orders his minions to release his secret weapon, the colossal reptilian titan known as Shimu, who he's somehow able to control using the crystal at the end of his whip. Forced to obey the Star King's commands, Shimu fires a blast of frost breath that Kong attempts to block with his axe. But the ice forms around the blade and starts working its way up Kong's arm, badly injuring his right hand. Outmatched, Kong is forced to retreat through a tunnel out of the cave, and Star King sends some of his minions to chase after him, raising Kong's axe above his head as he celebrates his victory. Kong falls back to his hunting grounds, using traps to take out his pursuers whenever he can, until he finally reaches a dead end and prepares to make his last stand. This time, the apes notice his tripwire and carefully step over it, but suddenly, someone sets off the trap anyway, burying the attackers under a pile of boulders. It's Zuko, and he and Kong start heading towards the Iwi village where they can hopefully find some help. While observing the Iwi people going about their daily lives, Bernie and the others are startled by the sound of a loud horn. The Iwis quickly gather around a large wheel, using it to open the barrier where Kong and Zuko are waiting on the other side. The apes are relieved to get to safety, but what they don't realize is that the one eye was tailing them the whole time. And after seeing the portals leading up to the surface, he rushes back to the Star King's lair to tell his boss what he found. Upon learning about the portals, the Star King raises a war party and sets off towards the village mounted on Shimu's back, determined to finally conquer the surface world. But he's going to learn the hard way that Kong isn't humanity's only protector, and the atomic iguana just got a serious upgrade. Back on the surface, Godzilla awakens from his rest and explodes through the ice, having absorbed Tiamat's energy source to somehow become 20 times more badass and powerful than he already was before. Trapper goes down and takes a scan of Kong's injured arm, saying that he's in bad shape and wouldn't survive more than a few minutes in another fight. They need a way to get him healed up fast, and that's when Trapper comes up with an idea that's so crazy that it just might work. After the fight with Mecha Godzilla, the mad scientists at Monarch decided that they needed a way to make Kong even stronger. Enter Project Powerhouse, a top-secret program that was canned, when they realized that giving Kong a weapon might actually backfire in horrific fashion. But not before they finished a prototype, and as luck would have it, that prototype happens to be hidden in a bunker back at the destroyed outpost. Trapper quickly returns to the outpost and comes back with the weapon, a massive power gauntlet called the Beast Glove that attaches itself Transformers style to Kong's injured arm, and not a moment too soon, because the Scar King and his buddies are on their way. Rising to his feet, Kong gets up and does a giant hell yeah fist pump, but he still can't do this alone. With the Scar King on the way, Gia convinces him to call up his old rival Godzilla, and Kong rushes to the surface hoping to track the big fella down before it's too late. Okay, before we see what happens next, I think it's time to quickly talk about this new threat and to go over a few ideas that might help in the next fight. The Blizzard Lizard Shimo is some kind of giant reptile much like Godzilla, and despite the fact that she's currently being controlled by the Scar King, she's actually one of the few titans who aren't truly a threat. Something about her titan biology results in her constantly emitting a cloud of freezing cold air that causes the ground or water around her to turn into ice. She can also harness this power into her signature Frostbite Blast, unleashing a beam of freezing ice that she uses in a way similar to Godzilla's atomic breath. It's strong enough to freeze other titans solid, and we can already see that it did a number on Kong's arm. Shimo also has one of the strongest defensive stats out of any titan that we've seen so far, making her able to withstand a direct shot from Godzilla's supercharged atomic breath. which would turn most other titans into jelly. She's a bit too tough even for Kong, but with Godzilla's help, he just might be able to take on Shimu and the Scar King in a fight. Kong may have lost his axe, but now that he has his new power glove, he's literally packing an extra punch. The Beast Glove here is an impressive addition to Kong's arsenal. If his punches were strong before, then they must be insanely powerful now. It also comes with an electric stun ability and advanced armor plating that works as a shield against powerful attacks, even Shimu's Ice Breath. But how can we make it better to give Kong even more of a fighting chance? It's cool that the glove makes him punch extra hard, but he already punches harder than anyone else on the planet, so why stop there? We should give him the option to do something that he hasn't already done, and add specialized attachments to the glove made specifically to exploit the weakness of whatever creature that he's currently fighting, like a Mandalorian-style flamethrower to counter Shimu's Ice Breath. Now with that being said, the true best way to fight Shimu isn't to fight her at all, but we'll discuss Kong's other options in just a bit. While Kong is busy doing some Godzilla wrangling, the Iwis bring Jia to the top of an enormous temple where her Skull Island ancestry allows her to resurrect an ancient ally who was lost during the battle with Ghidorah several years back, Godzilla's girlfriend, the insectoid titan Mothra. At the same time, Trapper decides to take the HEAV for a quick spin, saying that he's coming back with some surprise reinforcements of his own. On the surface, Kong emerges from the vortex near the giant pyramid of Giza, and, having sensed his presence, Godzilla immediately shows up looking for a rematch. Seeing the big guy coming, Kong tries to signal that he isn't looking for a fight, but Godzilla here wants all the smoke, and wastes exactly no time truck-sticking Kong straight through the frickin' pyramid. This forces Kong to deploy some tactical pocket sand in the hopes of breaking the onslaught, but his trickery only succeeds in pissing Godzilla off even more, and he straight up suplexes Kong over his shoulders from 400 feet in the air. At this point, the big monkey is getting his ass kicked all up and down the block, but that's when he remembers his new power glove and hits Godzilla with a punch so hard that he actually manages to knock him out. The victory doesn't last long though, because as Kong is trying to drag him down through the vortex, Godzilla charges up his laser and puts him back on the run. The lizard is quickly able to gain the upper hand, but just when he's about to send Kong to meet his long-lost cousin Harambe, Mothra and Jia show up to say, "Stop the violence," and they put their differences aside once again to conquer the greater threat. Back at the Iwi village, the tribe reveals that they have one more trick up their sleeves. By forcing the two of the crystal pyramids together, they are able to create a gravity inversion that should hopefully keep the bad guys from reaching the portals to the surface, but only for a limited time. It's a good plan, but the Scar King and his boys show up just before they can put it into action, and he uses Shimo's Ice Breath to freeze the pyramids in place, stopping them in their tracks. Just then, Trapper here returns with a huge flock of electric verticins, and they're able to distract the bad guys long enough for he and the rest of the research team to start getting the hell out of there. Okay, it's time for the final showdown once again. What Kong and Godzilla should do here is play defense around the gravitational portals, since the Scar King's ultimate goal is to reach the surface, and use Godzilla's charged atomic breath to counter Shimu's powerful ice beam. I know that this hasn't exactly worked out the best in the past, but there's also a way that they could try working together with the military if they think that would help. Since we already know that one of the mystery portals leads to the pyramids, the military could evacuate the area nearby, have Kong and Godzilla try to trick the Scar King and Shimu to enter that particular portal, and then drop a nuke or an oxygen destroyer bomb on them once they reach the surface. Now, it's also important to realize that Shimu is not actually loyal to the Scar King, and this could be used to their advantage. If Kong and Godzilla target the Scar King's crystal that he uses to control her, then instead of fighting two powerful foes who are working together, they might be able to turn their enemies against each other. All of a sudden, a massive ball of energy hits the ground, and Kong and Godzilla charge into the fight just as the ice wall holding the pyramids breaks and sends them all flying through the air from the gravitational shockwave. The four of them start battling it out in 0G. with Kong taking on the Scar King and Godzilla focusing on Shimu. Suddenly, the gravitational inversion resets, and Kong, Godzilla, Shimu, and the Star King are sent tumbling through a vortex up to the surface, where they crash land on the beaches of Brazil. The Scar King quickly orders Shimu to start freezing everything in sight, but Kong and Godzilla manage to stop them before they turn the entire planet into an ice rink. Realizing that his new friend could be in trouble, Zuko leaps into the vortex with Kong's axe, hoping to help him out however he can. Using his whip, Scar King chucks the entire top half of a building at Kong, who blocks it with his glove, but it's enough of a distraction for Shimu to step in and start blasting Kong with her ice breath. That's when Godzilla gets back on his feet, and this time, he catches the Scar King's whip in his jaws, destroying the weapon with one powerful bite. He then goes back after Shimu, which gives Kong a chance to make a run for the crystal that controls her, but the Scar King holds him back before he can reach it. Just then, the little Zuko shows up and shatters the crystal with Kong's axe, setting the dragon free. The Scar King is furious, but now that he has to fight fair, he's completely outmatched, and Kong and Godzilla start juggling his ass through the air before Shimu freezes him solid with her ice breath, and Kong shatters his frozen body into a million pieces, ending his reign of terror once and for all. With the evil Star King defeated, the Iwi are able to return to their lives in peace, and they throw a big party to thank the research team for their help. Godzilla returns to his nest in the Colosseum to slumber until the day that he's needed again, and Kong goes back to the Hollow Earth, now with Zuko and Shimo at his side, where he takes his rightful place as the true king, both of them having learned a very important lesson. Sometimes the enemy of your enemies can be your friend, especially when those enemies are a giant evil orangutan and his ice-breathing pet dragon. And with that, we come to another exciting conclusion. Man, I love Godzilla vs. Kong. I love Godzilla a lot. Here's a Godzilla VHS. I like Godzilla. Did I like this movie? Hell yeah, but let me know what you guys thought about it in the comments below. How would you have survived this situation? I'm dying to find out. If you liked this video, please give a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm the guy. I'll see you in the next video, and have a damn good day, like the songs say.